Harwich Conservation Commission for February 5th. As required by open meeting law, I have to announce that this meeting is being recorded, and if anyone wishes to do any recording, you have to let us know at this time. Okay. First item is a request for determination of applicability, Beth Windmill, common area of Daisy Street and Sequatum Road.
Hi, everybody. Hi. This will be my third meeting, so I think I recognize most of you, especially me.
Beth, if you wouldn't mind sitting, that way you can be picked up by the mic.
Oh, okay.
Or you can stand just closer to it, it's fine.
My name is Beth Windmill. I live at 15 Daisy Street, and I am a part-time resident of Harwich. I just wanted to say my presence here is not as a formal representative of any association. I am here to help only as a concerned neighbor and someone who loves the beach at the end of Daisy Street. This will be the third meeting related to the stairs and the railings at the end of Daisy Street. And I just wanted to be sure that I was clear that the focus tonight is on the stairs, the railings, and the ownership of the beach. And that future plans for improvements are a whole separate issue. Am I correct with that, Amy?
Correct, that's what it's been advertised for, and that's what we'll stick to tonight.
Okay. I was thinking about the trajectory of the last 5 months, and I just kind of in my mind made some bullet points. And looking back at our meeting in October, I just recall, for anyone who's here or anyone who might not have been at the meeting, that when this issue started, Laurie Phillips came to the meeting, and she represented the neighborhood group. Her presence is no longer available, but she came to that meeting, and at that meeting, she acknowledged the error in misunderstanding communications and failure to file the proper applications for the stairway. And she also said at that time that clearly that it was never done secretly. We weren't going out at night and putting in posts, and that it was never done with any malice of intent. And she apologized at that meeting. I don't know if you were all here, and she said that. So since that first meeting, the Conservation Committee requested certain things, and I thought we complied 100% with what was requested. We submitted the retroactive application, including maps and sketches and the builder's summary on time. We secured the legal abutters' names and addresses, and we sent certified letters to them. And I gave the little slip to Amy that we had done that. And we also covered the abutting sides of the staircase with jute as requested. So I thought we met those requests 100%. And then we went on to the second meeting, December 8th, when you brought those nice cookies. We remember that. I almost brought Valentine cookies, but I said no. And at the second meeting, we discussed a lot of things, but I think at the end of the day, one of the big questions was the ownership of the beach. I want to point out that Laurie Phillips at the time had, in October, she'd gone to the town hall to try and investigate the ownership of the beach, but she was not successful. So I guess that still became a questionable issue, and I guess Amy will address that tonight. So this kind of brought me up to date in my mind on the current progress, and being an educator, I have another handout for you because I'm obsessive compulsive about bullet points and handouts and all that, so you'll get something else. But for the moment, this is where we are, and basically, and most importantly, I am here to respectfully request from the committee members and on behalf of the neighbors that our existing stairs and railings be allowed to remain in place as built, with no further work on the slope except for plantings. I'm not a builder, I'm not an engineer, but I feel very confident that that structure is safe and well-built. As I said, I don't have that professional background, but having seen them built and talking with the builder, that's my feeling. Subjectively, I can say that when I go down those stairs now with my 14-month-old grandchild and the 5-year-old and the 7-year-old running ahead of me, that I feel so much safer than I did over the years. Because those stairs, as you know, were unsafe, undermined, crooked, and there was no railings. So I can only speak from that objective viewpoint and request that you consider this carefully, because it's really important to the neighbors and everybody that enjoys and uses that beach. So I do have something for you, and I won't take up any more of your time. I know you've got a million things on the agenda. So just to help me and summarize, I just made this little summary with some bullet points, and you can read them at your leisure.
Thank you. We'll keep
And
one
add
for
them
the
to your
file.
Thank you. Add them to your file.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
You know, I'm up close, I can see your names. I needed my driving glasses to read your names. John.
Thank you very much.
Hey, I know you probably know all this. I know you have minutes, I know you have videos. You read them carefully, I'm sure you do, but it's my compulsive.
No, it's helpful to have something for the file.
All right.
Okay, Amy?
Sure. So at the end of last meeting, kind of came away with two things. One, the ownership question, and two, whether or not the stairs would have been permitted, how they were done. So the first part with the ownership, I did sit down a couple of times with our town assessor, and we looked at things. Originally, this whole side of basically all of the properties along Sequattam Road that had waterfront were owned by just one family. It was the Guida family. And they subsequently subdivided that, sold it off. So we did find in the deed, we have it, the deed that shows basically for residents who live in the area that they have deeded access to beaches A, B, C, and D. It's 4 access points along Sequattam Road. And so we looked further into that to see, okay, to either side of that, how did this come to be? And it has been discovered that it is the end of a road, what we call a paper road, meaning a road that exists on paper in an assessor's book, but where you're actually there, it's just land. But that we still cannot decide, it is not public, it is not a town road, so it is private road. Sorry, some of this came up at the very last end. So it is a private road, but we still can't find ownership to that. Typically on private roads, it is owned by everybody on that road. So what does that mean? Is this because as an extension of Daisy Street? Is it the residents on Daisy Street who own this? Is it the people in the whole area that have deeded access to these A, B, C, and D points? Is it them? We don't know, but we do know it is private, and you do have an interest in that because you have deeded rights to it. So we didn't go any further. With a request for determination of applicability, the type of application you filed, we don't require an owner to sign off on that as we would if it was a notice of intent. I think if we were to allow this project, is not giving Beth or anybody else any more rights or claims of ownership of this section. It's 40 feet wide. 40 by 30, did we? I think 40 by 30 piece of land. So, that being said, in my mind, we go to the question of the staircase themselves. So there was a staircase there previously. It was essentially concrete blocks set into the grade. It was narrower than what is there. It was treacherous. And I did meet with the previous applicant for this a couple years ago, and we discussed just putting a railing in. I said if you want to do railing, could be administrative, just like you said here. Whole stairs got built. So now we go back to our regulations in terms of what we would typically require for staircases. We have two distinct possibilities. One is a staircase on an inland bank should be raised above grade, 18 inches, or staircases can be dug into the ground, or staircases dug into the ground may be permitted with adequate switchbacks and drainage to control erosion. So the commission does have the opportunity to do dug-in staircases. This is a staircase that is in the grade. I would, and I had a hard time kind of coming up with this conclusion, but if we were to put switchbacks or put a landing in to break up the slope, I think you would end up covering more area along the bank, potentially causing more damage. And in order to do those things, I think we would have probably preferred to have seen an option for raised, but given is that we were here, I think a raised one in this location, if being that it's north facing, very steep slope. Anytime you have disturbance on a north facing severe slope like this, it has a hard time sometimes of coming back. So my recommendation, without getting much farther into you, is that you approve it with the condition that we work together this spring and that you comply with a planting plan that we put together to better stabilize those sides. And it would be a native plants from our native plant list, something that we would work on together. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Carolyn?
This is considered a dug-in staircase because it is not the 18 inches above the ground?
It is dug in. The side parts on the side are, I mean, it's dug in a little bit.
Okay, those pieces,
Yeah.
those side pieces.
To me.
Okay, otherwise, a wooden structure would be totally sitting on top. It wouldn't be dug in at all. How would you,
You would basically take this, if you were to raise it up,
yeah,
put it on sonotubes, and the whole thing is 18 inches above grade.
the whole thing is 18?
Well, the
okay.
lowest structural member would be 18
Mhm.
inches above grade.
Okay, so it is a dug-in. That's.
Which if you did that, it would force it to either be steeper or potentially go out farther unless you you went along the side and then down, which would be more damage on the slope.
Switchbacks. That's my concern.
That's it? Okay, Mark?
As I see it in this particular application, the resolution is more important than the process that was not taken to get the proper permits. I agree with Amy as far as the planting on the sides and so forth to maintain the stability. I would recommend that there was some crushed stone that was put in under the stairs from top to bottom, just to maintain some of that sandy material from drifting down. It requires a little bit of effort, but I don't think it's unmanageable, and I think that would aid to the well-being of the structure. And for the sake of trying to find resolution, I'd be content with that.
John?
Yeah, well, it seems to me there aren't very many or any good alternatives to the current situation as far as I can see. And so I agree that we should probably go along with this solution. My concern about it is the planting, and given that location, the steepness of the slope, and the fact that it's facing north, that it may be hard to get plants established there. And I'm sure, Amy, that you will give your best advice about that. But I think we should probably condition this to keep a close eye on whatever is planted there. And I don't know if that should include some, a seed mix along
Yes.
with shrubs in order to just hold the thing down as soon as possible.
That was gonna be, if this moves forward, my first suggestion is to do a Cape Cod seed mix of native grasses and put that down early, March potential timeframe. Get that established, but leave the jute, we'll make sure it's not too thick, but leave the jute down, seed over it. Let that start to come in, and then start planting, and do the planting like in May. But those grasses provide the best root system, and that will help quickly stabilize
The
things.
Cape Cod grass.
Yeah, I would give you
And
specifications.
that grows over jute, huh? I've got a learning curve here, but I'll learn.
Let's
and
see
we
what
will do
everyone
that.
else has.
I guess just my other point about that is, I'm not sure, I think that slope faces almost due north. The funny thing about it is, even though it's in the shade, potentially in the middle of the hottest part of the summer, the sun is north, and it
Yep.
may get substantial sun on a hot afternoon, which would also dry things out.
Right.
And so I don't know, they may need water down there in
Yep.
order to get things established.
Folks in the neighborhood may have to chat with them about taking turns and watering it for a season or two, making sure things grow.
Okay.
Jim?
I agree with the previous comments. I don't really have anything to add.
Ernie?
Yeah, just two questions. The first one is probably for Amy. The regs require that we don't have any arsenic, copper, or chromium preservative treatment in any of the wood. And I noticed the specs talk about using 4x4 pressure-treated posts. Have we confirmed that that meets the regulations?
So let me look at that, so what it's not allowed to do, it's not, Ronaldo, you might have to come up for this one. The pressure-treated wood that you used, was it ACQ or it was ACQ, not CCA? Okay, so that is, not copper chromated arsen, what is ACQ? Why am I-
Arsenic,
Huh?
chromium,
Chromium?
yeah.
ACQ has no arsenic or chromium in it.
Has no,
It's,
but
s-
copper?
Copper.
Salt and copper.
Okay, okay.
Does have copper in it?
Yes.
Our regs say no copper, but
It does
It's,
have copper.
it's more, and for anything that's touching the water, which would be the bottom tread might, but
So we're comfortable with that then?
it's up to you.
The other question I had, the comment was that the bottom 5 stairs were, part of the reason that we had to replace them was because of winter damage to the bottom 5 stairs because of structural integrity. What have we done to stabilize that, to make sure it doesn't happen again, if anything?
Nothing else.
Nothing.
Nothing else was done, no.
So it might happen this winter if we have of course, it's not looking that way, but, all right.
A lot of times, maybe this is something to think of for the future, when you have a situation like this with a steep slope with a set of stairs and your bottom stair is really in touch with the water at times during high water seasons. If you need to replace it, or maybe you could even do it now, that bottom section would be able to be removable. So that in the winter months, you could fold it up onto the stairs, onto the existing stairs, so the bottom is not in contact with the water, but that's something we can,
Yeah,
that's what we see mostly in coastal, saltwater areas,
Mhm.
but potentially could be a good option here.
Okay.
Would we ever consider putting a burlap barrier roll at the bottom to absorb water? Or is that kind of
I
not
fear
not
that that would just
effective?
become debris, honestly, with
Okay.
the waves there. If you put it, it's not really, they're not meant to be in water for very long.
All right.
There's nothing you've seen alternatively to having a removable section on the bottom, Amy, that would prevent that? It would help stabilize the bank, the base of the stairs.
Nothing that I'm thinking
I
of
see
right,
nothing, like,
nothing that I'm thinking of right now that wouldn't be
have-
so temporary that it would become debris somewhere else.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Okay. Other than that, I agree with Mark's comments about putting some gravel underneath it and then the plantings that have been mentioned so far, so.
Can I ask for a
That's fine.
clarification on the
Yeah,
stone?
oh, excuse me, I was just going to
Sorry.
say, Mark, what size gravel do you think would be most
I'd
appropriate?
recommend 3/4 native,
Okay,
Native
That's it,
stone,
yeah.
not
okay,
hard.
just 3/4 inch crushed native.
okay.
That way it's easy to handle and it'll stay put as well.
Underneath the thing, and I don't imagine any kind of grass or plantings would do well under the stairs.
You'll have a
Shade.
degree of something that's gonna grow in there eventually, I'm sure,
but
because seed
nothing-
travels, but the crushed stone will break any water flow and keep the sand from moving around.
Okay.
Yep. No other comments?
I guess, a couple comments. I guess all of us agree that we would have liked it to be done differently, but to leave it as it is right now is probably, will create less damage than what's already been done. And that was one of my questions, that you're gonna work with them on planting, because we don't
Yeah.
have a planting plan per
And
se.
I'd be happy to show it with you before it got done, but it would be all native plants, but in addition to the grass mix, that would do well in the type of environment that you have, or have a better chance of doing well, I should say.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not gonna pick anything that loves, big, sun, all 24 hours, but all days worth of sun, 12 hours of sun.
There is
Pick
one.
more shady things.
There is one other question now. I'm trying to remember all that loose, broken up cement and everything that was down at the bottom. Weren't we
Oh, right.
asking them to clean that up?
No, you asked me to leave it. I was gonna do it, take it off, you told me not to do it,
But we said
trying
to
to-
leave it for now.
to leave it.
And also the comment, there was a sign
It should be
about,
removed.
somebody had put a sign there about throwing stuff up on the
Yeah, the
bank.
sign should be gone.
I think that's gone.
Okay, thank you.
And nobody should be
No,
touching the
Throwing
bank
stones
without
there.
no more stones
any work
added
being
to
done.
them.
So, the cement were the old stairs.
Yes.
At this time, I mean, the stop work is lifted, so I would recommend they be removed. If you wanted to, if there was any loose, anything behind there, if you wanted to put additional plantings or put some matting down to make sure it stays stable, I would recommend that for now.
Would you repeat that again? If we.
The stone, the
Broken
old
concrete.
stairs, the old concrete should
Yeah,
come out.
Yeah.
If, once you remove it, you see that things are really kind of unstable behind that, can mat that with some more of that jute matting that you had,
Mhm.
and we can work on incorporating that into planting in the spring too.
And future plans.
Yeah.
And future plans for the beach, maybe.
Not future plans, I mean, the concrete, the steps are, those old concrete is there as part of this project. That was the old set of stairs. They shouldn't have been put on the slope.
Right, but if we have future plans for some kind of a retaining structure, some kind, would
I
that ever
understand.
be incorporated? Could
It-
we,
Could at that time, but in this time, if we're having you remove the concrete and that becomes unstable because it no longer has anything there, that should be done this spring too. Not the new plan for whatever else you're thinking of, but
right,
to stabilize that.
so you're saying remove the concrete in the spring? Or no,
Any-
or wait and
You
see
can
how
remove
the
it now, and
erosion,
you can remove it now and put the matting down in its place if you need it. I'm happy to meet you down there. We can talk about it.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, remove the concrete off the property,
Okay.
not just off to the side, and on the bank, or anything like that,
Yep.
so. Okay, anything else? Anything from the audience? No? Would anybody like to make a recommendation?
I would move to accept the RDA for the stairway as described previously at the end of Daisy Street, and the planting to be under the direction of the road, all with a -2 determination.
Okay, Mark? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jim. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No? Motion carries.
We'll have the paperwork out to you within a couple of days. We'll send it to the address that you gave us.
Okay.
Let me just check that, make sure it's the right one.
Thank you very much.
And we'll email it to you anyways, but,
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I gave you the wrong summaries, but it's a
50.
little after the fact now, so you don't need it.
50 Oxbow, is that where I should mail it to?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm gonna run, and I need signature pages for these determinations, but feel free and start the next one without me. I just wanna make sure I get your signature so you don't have to come back
Okay,
later in the week.
oh,
I'll be right back.
all right. We have an RDA for Thomas and Caroline Lucy, 32 Dunes Road, for site improvement and sewage disposal system modifications.
Good evening. Stacy Kanaga of Coastal Engineering, representing the owner and applicant Thomas and Caroline Lucy for 32 Dunes Road. We are here, the proposed project is to overall improve the navigable walkways and path and stairs from the driveway areas of the main entrance of the home that faces Nons Road. In particular, one of the property owners' mobility has been restricted, and there is a desire for more uniform stairs and the addition of handrails to improve the accessibility and safety in the main stair entrance facing Nons Road. Overall, the property is located in a residential area and is bounded by Dunes Road to the south, Nons Road to the northeast, and Allen Harbor to the west. The limit of work for the overall project, delineated with the dashed line, is 4,900 square feet. I'll keep going with the existing conditions, but overall the disturbed area portion of this is actually a much smaller area to include the stairs, a small landscaped area, and a concrete apron that is only 2,600 square feet or so. The area is developed with a 2-story residential home, concrete drive there's a broom finish apron in front of the garage, and then a stamped concrete drive. The main hardscape entrance includes bluestone and granite steps, walkways, landings, stone walls, and then maintain landscape areas, all within the vicinity of the project. The stairs currently in the area vary in height from anywhere from 4 inches to 8 inches, and the walkways don't have rails except for there's a handrail up near the curved entrance that has a very wide set of handrails at the main door. This property is served by a 7-bedroom Title V sewage disposal system that is partially located within the vicinity of the project. More specifically, it's the septic tank and pump chamber. Septic tank being right, kind of traversing the driveway and landscape area, and pump chamber also mostly under the landscape area for the most part. The distribution box and soil absorption system is off in a side yard that is farther away from the proximity of this particular project. The FEMA flood zones within the project area are an X shaded and an AE zone with a flood elevation of 11, which would result in a resource area of this project being in the 50-foot buffer and 100-foot buffer to land subject to coastal storm flowage, and then also the 50-foot buffer and 100-foot buffer to the coastal bank. The area is not located in an NHESP mapped estimated and priority habitat of rare species. Key features of the proposed design is really squaring up the front entrance. Overall, I think it's approximately rounded off at like 40 square feet. They're doing an interior renovation to the entrance and then an adjacent bedroom. That would be the only building expansion. The reconfigured stair areas are going to have a more uniform stair height and will incorporate handrails along the pathways between the building entrance and the two driveways over here at the apron. The materials of construction will be a stone or stone veneer for all the landing stairs, walkways, and as part of the project, the proposed stairs, this footprint is located over the existing pump chamber, which will require its relocation. I do have indicated in the plan that it's a 1,500-gallon pump chamber. I did submit a Board of Health variance today due to its proximity to wetland, and we had to actually upsize it to a 2,000-gallon tank, but the footprint will not change compared to what I showed, so this footprint is still valid. It will actually place the pump chamber, the existing pump chamber is 14 feet from the wetland resource area, and we will be moving it to be 35 feet from the wetland resource areas. Overall, there'll be a net impervious decrease in the area of 33 feet overall in the 0 to 100-foot buffer as part of the project. And we'll be installing erosion and sediment control mechanisms around the perimeter of the project prior to construction in order to mitigate migration of sediment, and then we'll maintain we'll stabilize the site once it's complete. Most of that's going to be hardscape basically, and some vegetation in the existing landscape area. There is a request for a variance for the proposed project as it is located within 50 feet or the no disturb zone and within 100 feet buffer of the coastal bank and land subject to coastal storm flowage. But overall, we're not impacting the resource areas themselves, and in addition, the area is extensively developed with building hardscape and driveway now, and as a result, we do not anticipate any adverse effects to the wetland. This stamped driveway, in fact, is going to be a buffer between the work and the wetland, and is not anticipated to be disturbed as part of this because it would be extremely hard to restamp it. Again, overall, there's a net decrease in the net decrease in the impervious area. So we feel that it would be possible to grant a negative determination for the request for determination of applicability. Sorry, it's a mouthful.
Okay, thank you.
Do you all have any questions? I know there were other questions, possibly.
I'll keep it very brief.
Gosh, I'm sorry, I have a sick child.
Of course, it would be right when you're
Of course it would be right
you're here.
I'm so sorry.
No worries. So the only thing I'll touch on is there were previous delineations on this. Previous delineations were actually, this puts much more of the property within conservation jurisdiction, so thank you for kind of bringing this to our attention, because previous delineations did have it as edge of dune, closer to, believe it or not, there's a little bit of a dune just seaward of Salt Marsh and then Oyster Creek. So This, you're catching that there's actually a coastal bank there, floodplain, because it is not, doesn't have the steepness really needed to be a true coastal bank. The fact that it is, by default, a coastal bank because it's at floodplain.
Correct.
Is a good catch. It does put more of everything into play. The previous delineation had nothing really to do with the house itself. It was about the pool. That house and the hardscape has been this way for a period of time, based on old delineations. So, that being said, you have a net reduction of 33 square feet of hardscape within the buffer zone. This does take into account an excess wall that was constructed as part of the pool, so there's still a decrease when you take that into effect. I would recommend approval of it, making this the new delineation and plan of record. And with the conditions that, and we talked about it when you met with me, that there's to be no chemical application within commission jurisdiction on the property. This would include fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, etc. And any reseeding to be done would be with a native Cape Cod mix. And I would recommend approval with a -2. Actually, I'm sorry, this should be a 3. -3. That's it.
Okay. Carolyn?
I don't have any questions right now.
Okay, Mark?
I have no remarks other than I agree with Amy's.
John?
I don't actually, I'm having a hard time deciphering the plan that we had in our Dropbox.
Okay.
Which appears to be what you're showing up there. Is what is shown in this plan the proposed or the existing?
It's an overlay, and I actually did do a color version, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, very
Very
nice.
helpful, 'cause
I didn't want to confuse everybody right out of the gates. And I mostly just highlighted the walls and extents of the stairs. The orange, this walkway here will be modified in both, so that's why I didn't go to town highlighting all of it. But the delineations, essentially, this walkway is existing. This is the extent. The orange kind of outlines the extent of the existing walkway that connects to this concrete
I see.
apron. This will be the same in the existing and the proposed.
So that thing you were just pointing to
Yes.
is
Existing.
existing where you go from the driveway level
Uh,
up?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so-
This
all
is
right,
more
so-
gradual, this walkway, and then there's a few stairs and landing, It's kind of like these long little landing walkway things. And then the blue is intended to show, it actually shows the wall coming out more in this area, but because they're bringing it so far in this area, that's what accounts for the decrease in impervious area. So, and it's a lot more tight to the site to be rounded, so they'll come out a more square entrance and be able to have a landing with a landing that kind of juts off to the side, and then have stairs that go down, and then they either step all the way down to the concrete apron, or you can walk around a landing to this other driveway area.
Okay, so my understanding then is that your decrease in hardscape area is coming from increasing that planting area.
Correct.
Right. So that, along with other parts well inside the 50-foot buffer here, I mean, there is sort of a postage stamp lawn there, but there's a fair amount of pretty formal gardens there that seem to have been recently mulched when we were there today.
Mm-hmm.
But and there are Rosa rugosa out at the edge, but there are other more formal things further in, which I just want to note that it's not just the lawn that
Right.
we would be requesting, or we would be conditioning that no chemicals, no fertilizer, nothing goes into the beds or the lawn. In fact, the bed area may be bigger than the lawn area here, so that's my point here.
Okay, yes.
Jim?
Just to clarify too, that would apply to the whole property that's within jurisdiction. Is the whole property within jurisdiction?
No,
There's a small portion outside of it,
yes.
Yeah.
more, yeah.
Yeah, this wraps around to kind of the backyard. It's, there's like a deck and stairs over here, and then there's a kitchen and outdoor kitchen and patio area. Most of that is excluded based on how it kind of bends around, and then the pool over on this area.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it sets it, I think, through the building itself.
Any part of the property that's within the flood
Correct.
zone or buffer zone.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yep.
No comments.
I don't have any other comments at this point. So, can I have anybody else from the audience? No? Anybody,
I'll make a motion to approve the RDA for 32 Dunes Road for site improvements and sewage disposal system modifications with a -3 determination.
Second.
seconded by Mark? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your time. Did that
We'll
help?
send this,
Did that help?
we'll send this out to your office within a couple days.
Okay, great, thank you.
And
And
we'll
then,
send around both Beth Lindner's and this one for your signature, okay?
Next, we have an RDA for David Bogren, 12 Hiawatha Road,
Thank you.
for demo existing building and associated features.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, second to sign your papers before we get started. I'd like to sign,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we don't forget to do it at the end, when we're all racing to get out of here.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Rick Judd, Moran Engineering. To my left, to your right, Dave Fogren, the property owner of number 12 Hiawatha. Some of you, I know, did a site visit. The existing four-bedroom structure basically has a building coverage of 1,243 square feet, and then we have a site coverage. There's a small patio area in the back. Then we have a deck, covered deck in the front with a concrete landing and a stone driveway. Actually, I should ask if you'd be kind enough to just pull up the site plan. They're small in the 8.5 by 11s. If you just look at them, I could walk you through the proposal. The site itself is in a flood zone AE, elevation 12. And what the proposal before you is to raise the existing structure and replace the structure. Actually, a small reduction in the actual house size that would go there. The sewage disposal system that's currently there has 3 variances. We would be able to extinguish all variances under Title V and put a system in there that is fully compliant. Of course, with new construction, we would have a flood compliant foundation. The proposed driveway would be shelled. The walkways would not be cemented in place, they would be pervious. Any downspouts, we have a little work to do with that, would be directed to dry wells at the front of the property by way of piping to them. What we're looking to do is to have your input, please, on the proposal before you. David has the authority to make any changes that you may wish, but I am
I gotta
here to-
pass it by my wife first.
Okay. But through the chair, I'll take any questions that the board may have at this time.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
Oh, not many questions. My own question is, what's the driveway made out of? You said shell. We could also say native stone would be okay. The only resource area here is floodplain, which is an AE 12. No other wetland resources on the site. New septic would be Title V compliant. The proposed building and site coverage are decreasing. So I would recommend approval with a -3.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, that one should have been the -2, because 2 is actually in the resource area. -3 is buffer zone 2. So I should have swapped them for the last two ones. So it's a -2 approval for me.
For this.
Yes.
Okay. Carolyn?
What is your erosion control barrier? What does that mean?
Basically, anytime you have demolition or construction, moving of earth, so when you raise the building, to be a good neighbor, the downside neighbor, you want to have sediment control. You also want debris control. So we would do this regardless. So the erosion control, if you have an open
And that's not
land.
permanent?
So
No, it
it's
would not
straw
be.
wattle.
That's all.
Okay, Mark?
Excuse me. No, I agree with Amy. Whole thing's pretty straightforward, so.
Okay, John?
No, no questions or comments?
Jim?
Yeah, no comments other than the fertilizer compliance.
Ernie?
It's going to be the easiest one of the night, hopefully. I have no comments either, so.
And I thought it was pretty straightforward, so no comments here either. So, do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the RDA for 12 Hiawatha Road with a -2 determination.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ernie. All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Carolyn, was that a aye? Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next, we have a RDA for John and Diane Giblin, 36 Depot Road. Demolish garage, deck, porch, and patio, and build a new garage and deck.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the commission. Dan Ojala with Downkeep Engineering. We're going to try and tie for the easiest of the night. This is a, it's a pretty straightforward little project. Whereas you were looking at 32 Dunes Road, they were all in the 50 and redoing stuff. Here, we're outside of the 50 by a good amount. You can see our work limit line is probably, well, it's whatever, 60-something feet away. It's, from the wetland. And so they're just, we're doing a couple things. Existing home, existing drive, basically putting an addition, a new two-car garage where the driveway is, and demoing the back garage and putting in a little bit of living space there. We're also nudging it out of the flood zone, and that also pulls it a little bit away from the wetland. So all, fairly positive things. There's just a little bit of fill around the house. We're digging, not the whole thing as a basement, but the back is, so I get a little bit of dirt coming out. We'll smooth that around the back, redo it. Amy had called up and was just checking on our calculations for the decrease, so we just sent a handy sketch showing all the green is hardscape being removed, the additions over the existing drive, and that's the only addition is a little bit out there in the gold. So the net was going down about 284 on the square footage. So she had thought that would be appropriate as an RDA. We'd certainly agreed to put on the organic fertilizer down near the wetland. The wetland resources is land subject to coastal storm flowage, which is an A zone. And then there's an ancient cranberry bog that's all overgrown up to the north, a huge many-acre bog, and we're the very south tip of that. Groundwater is very likely to the south away from that, but still we're fine with that and be happy to comply. So pretty simple addition. Owners are anxious to get going. They're here if you have any questions, and the builder is as well. Be glad to answer them myself if you do have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
Looks like one tree is proposed to be removed pretty much between the garage and the home. And I would just like to clarify that most likely it would be no fertilizers, not organic fertilizers, but no fertilizers
So
permitted.
even like a manure-based? No,
That's up to the commission, but our regulations have changed.
yeah. Well, you get a little bit out of the air, right? A little bit of nitrogen in the rain, so I think we're comfortable enough with that, right? Yeah, no, that's fine.
Let's see. New structures will be outside the floodplain, farther from the wetland than existing. In most cases, you're seeing a net reduction. Can I have that one for the, is that a chance I can have
Absolutely,
the
there's an
colored
extra
one for
copy
the
right
file?
here. Yep, you may.
Thank you. All work is outside the 50-foot buffer. The limit of work is actually at the 70. Minor regrading, but that's just evening things out, as Dan said, and not bringing infill. And again, I got the numbers wrong. This should be a recommend approval with a -3. I don't know what I was thinking, I'm sorry. That's it. If anybody wants to see this, I'll pass it around.
Carolyn?
I'm just looking at, for the most part, the proposed paved driveway is out of our jurisdiction, isn't it?
Absolutely, the only, the only portions are those tiny little colored areas, yeah. Or just
I
about.
would recommend that you look into, we can't require you to, but look into a more pervious surface for that driveway. There are possibilities that look like a paved driveway, but they are much more pervious, and you wouldn't have the runoff that your new paved driveway would have. That's my only thought.
Mark?
Again, I agree with Amy on this, and to me, it's a very straightforward project. I have no questions.
John?
No questions.
Jim?
Yeah, just to clarify there, we generally don't discriminate between organic and non-organic fertilizers because it's the same amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that ends up in the waters causing the problem, so that's why.
Slow release is better than fast release for sure, so organics generally be a slow release.
It could be
but
better, but it's
you still get the load.
still nitrogen and phosphorus.
Fair
yeah.
enough.
So, and that does apply to anything on the property within the 100-foot buffer zone,
Yeah.
including planting beds, et cetera.
I'll be fine with that.
That's my only comment.
Ernie?
So question on your mitigation calculations. It appears that your addition within the 50 to 100 is larger than the existing garage and deck, is that right? Correct,
that's accurate. The driveway is the green. The driveway would also be all this area. So we didn't really, so that's basically, it's over a hardscape driveway where the addition is going.
Is that paved or is that gravel right now? I believe gravel, right?
It's a dense packed gravel, yeah.
All right, so we're putting a structure
Right.
on what used to be a gravel driveway, and I'm not sure if that's
Catch that, yeah.
an
Oh, the
adequate.
town of Barnstable
Calculation
defines
of
that as
mitigation.
hardscape. You guys are not, I mean, you wouldn't let us put that right near a wetland, right? But it's not hardscape, or, I mean, it's generally, I mean, it's, the town of Barnstable, you know, my guys always, we do it, work in a lot of towns, but sometimes it's prescriptive that those are, it is hardscape when you have a gravel, or even like a pervious paver, they say, nope, that's hardscape.
I guess where I'm going is, personally, I'd like to know what the difference in, what the additional structure is within the 50 to 100.
Sure, I can estimate that for you.
And is the addition proposed to be on a crawl space, slab,
Slab on grade, yeah.
slab
Well,
on grade?
well, to be clear, this back portion here, that has a little bit of a basement in it just for utilities. This is all slab on grade. So getting back to the question at hand.
Thank you.
So you're talking about, the length of it is about 34, and the average width, I don't know if anybody has a calculator, looks about 20. So that would be the size of gravel driveway that's being replaced by, a roof. And if
Some of
you'd like,
that's
we can.
outside the 100, though.
Well, Correct. Yeah, the overall is a little bigger than that, so the overall is like 32 by 30.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were doing the
Yeah, no,
overall.
I was estimating that
Okay.
the size that's within it. The
Thank you.
92 square foot, I didn't take that out, so
Yep.
I guess, to be fair, would reduce that a little bit. And, you know, I mean, but, so to think about it, you know, we could certainly put in a dry well that would infiltrate it on site and would reduce the runoff. If the board felt better about that, would be happy to do that. But again, you've got a great big driveway there now, and we're taking it up by roof, so we didn't think it was a net negative. That other project you were just looking at had tons of stuff right near the wetland, and this is all 70-plus away. And it's an old cranberry bog, you know, they used to throw fertilizer right in it. It hasn't been that way for years, and it's coming back nicely. But it's not like it was you know, it's a pristine salt marsh or something. It was an active farm not too many years ago.
So your calculations are that it's about an extra 75?
No, because he's saying there's a
There's-
decrease.
No, I'm sorry, 750
The garage is
square feet of
630.
coverage.
Yeah, it's not, I would guess it's a little under that, but probably on the order of 600 of gravel being replaced by a roof. So
Yeah.
if you would argue that gravel, hard-packed gravel isn't hardscape, then that is accurate, yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, Amy?
If you give us
Define-
50%, which is, you know, the curve, you look at a curve number of turf is probably, you know, 20 or less if it's well, in a gravel driveway, we usually use about at least a 50% curve number for runoff. So if we went from 50 to 100, it's half, and if you look at half of that square footage, it's 300, and we're going down 300, so it's a net wash. So maybe you'd let it slide in this case. It's fuzzy math, but, you know. I mean, a lot of times, like, if we do mitigation and we do, say we're pulling up invasives, we don't get 100% of credit for that, but we get 50%, you know? So there's shades of gray, and I think in this case, you might find that it was appropriate, especially perhaps if we added a roof dry well, might be better. And,
That or a drip line along the edge, depending on
drip
how
edge.
close you are to groundwater.
Yeah, it is quite a ways, luckily, we did check that out.
Yep.
It's highly influenced to the south, so it's not, it's very low groundwater, but,
The way we define, so, structure, I mean, when we talk about, you know, mitigation for structures, if you had an increase in structure we say is including but not limited to, you know, homes, additions, decks, patios, things like that. I don't know if we say driveway, I have the regs, but I have to look at them. Essentially, it is almost, it's not patio, but similar characteristics in the drainage and whatnot. It's not a building so much, but I also understand your point is what's the additional negative impact that this could be causing here. I'd be a little bit more concerned if this was going to be in a undisturbed, well, a area that was less disturbed than it already is. It's a tough call, because we haven't, I mean, it's
certainly
going
not something that
from
you would allow, you know, in the
pervious
buffer.
area to living space.
Like in-
So I think it goes without saying that there should be a dry well or French drain around the building.
Yeah.
Not necessarily as mitigation, but I think that should be anyways, because currently you're getting some level of infiltration in the driveway that you wouldn't be getting with a roof.
Yeah, so the dry well would mitigate that,
I
and then
think there
would
would
be a
be
net.
benefit
Yeah.
if, but I still don't, I wouldn't consider it, as you said, a 50% rule. Maybe we don't have really a way to quantify it, for us. I think the not using any chemicals is a good thing. In addition, if the owners, maybe to make this go a little smoother, if the owners would be willing to do a row of native mitigation plantings along the existing edge of vegetation closer to the wetland, that is an option as well.
Yeah, if I may, just looking at the plans too, I think one way to mitigate this would be, your proposed addition is very close to the 100. And if you were to run your your drainage lines along the north side of the driveway, I assume it is, outside of the 100 to a dry well. I think I'd be comfortable with that. You know, that gets it outside the resource area, so that would eliminate a lot of the concerns I think we would have, at least I would have anyhow.
So pipe everything over to where it says proposed porch,
Outside the 100.
Well,
that area,
yeah,
or
well,
even,
say
even up there.
where it says proposed paved drive,
That,
you know, right outside the driveway, if you took it off of the farthest corner from the proposed addition and ran your drainage pipes along the side of the driveway, parallel with the driveway outside the 100.
yep, you get it
I
up to
think
outside the 100.
you'd get it where it needed to be.
That looks like a good
Okay.
idea.
Anything
Works for
else?
me.
Anything else?
They might, I don't know if they have
Oh,
comments.
are there any comments or questions? No. Do we have a motion?
Are we including mitigation plantings or not?
If you get it out, if
I
you get the roof runoff outside the 100, I'm comfortable with what Ernie recommended, but that's up to you. If you want to make a motion and change that.
No,
I mean, we are, well,
I have a question about that, which is, I'm trying to decipher the contours here. It's not clear to me that you're not trying to go uphill if you do that.
No,
So,
we'll just have to go deeper.
okay,
what was the thought on the dry well that we're talking about, or what?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty fairly level. You're right, that isn't the easiest to transfer, but that's a 14 contour over there, and the slab is gonna be at 14, so it's not,
see,
it's,
okay.
it'll be down a couple of feet. And the groundwater is less than elevation of 4.5 or so, so we should have
You have
plenty
room.
of dry sand, yeah.
Carolyn, were you still questioning that?
You know what I'm questioning now is you're talking about, is it an uphill grade from the addition
It's going to be flat.
ground to the street?
It's very level, so we're gonna be raising the ground. The slab right now is around, the top foundation is 14.3, and that's a 14 contour out front, so it's
Okay.
pretty darn level.
Ground, so it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
May I ask
I'm
one more?
wondering on this page,
Go ahead.
Yeah, right,
as
right,
it's
right.
running
Sorry.
back that way.
Okay,
I
Ernie?
don't know if you're done. So, one more question. Currently, it's an existing gravel driveway. Never mind, I'm fine. It's outside the 100. I'm not concerned about it.
Yeah, most of it is, and
You're gonna pave it outside the 100 anyhow.
And to these folks' credit too, this whole back is all natural out there within your
Yeah.
buffer. So a lot of sites you'll see where they're aggressive and they're right up against it. You might, I think they're treading pretty lightly overall. So hopefully we can just maintain this and with these improvements get approved. Thank you.
So I'm going back to Carolyn's question now. So there is no mitigation in terms of plantings?
That's up for you to decide.
But from my perspective, I'm fine. If we get
Okay.
that roof runoff
No, I'm
outside the
I'm just-
100, then I think
I'm
that
just
takes
double-checking,
care of the
that's all.
issue.
And you guys now have a plan on file showing the clearing limit, and it'll be enforceable if there's any further clearing. So it's, a lot of this is natural back there, so that's a good thing.
Okay, can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the RDA for 36 Deep Hole Road for a garage and deck, the -3 determination.
Second.
Seconded by Mark. All those,
She said 3.
all those, right, Amy said 3.
It is a 3.
Sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And we'll get a revised plan in then showing the dry well, and I'll put a note about the no fertilizer right on the
All right,
face of the plan.
so we will hold on issuing that until we get that plan.
Sounds good. We'll get it right out.
If it's- Yeah, you can sign that. I'm just going to hold on issuing.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Dan, do you have green cards? Either or, it's fine. I don't want both.
I don't want my file.
Stan, can you put these in that file, please? Actually, while we're passing things around, can I pass this to Ernie? Can you put this in the file for 32 Dunes Road? I wrote it on the front, but.
Yep.
I guess I don't want to lose things.
Okay. Next, we have a notice of intent for Sarah Toronto Forest, Beacon Valley Road, raise and replace dwelling. So you thought you were gonna be waiting a long time tonight.
Yeah. This is the quickest evening you guys have had in a long time.
So far, don't.
Well, you know, everything has been going swimmingly up to now, so no reason to. For the record, David Little from Ryder and Wilcox, and we're back for our third time. We listened to your comments. I provided you with a revised site plan. I also provided you with the revised site coverage calculations. The project has been changed, so we now actually have a 76 square foot reduction in the 0 to 50 foot buffer. We've scaled back the building. The limit of work, which extends out beyond the proposed building and the hardscaping, is there strictly for the planting plan that the landscape architect has proposed. So we have, with new structure, we now have in the 0 to 50 a 76 square foot reduction, and I noted that 3 times negative 76, that we don't get brownie points for removing it, that I've learned over the years, so I just gave myself 0 to be consistent. And then in the 50 to 100, 2 times the 698 square feet results in a total of 1,396 square feet of coverage. The planting plan that is revised provides 1,859 square feet of mitigation and 8 new trees. I think the landscape architect went into the detail of how the area just southeast of the dwelling will be significantly improved. The tree removal that's occurring right next to the dwelling is going to let a little light in and allow the plants that she's proposing to thrive in that area. And in the construction notes, construction note 6 does state gutters and downspouts connected to dry wells or crushed stone at a roof drip line shall be utilized to contain roof runoff. Obviously, in this situation, we don't have the opportunity to get a dry well out of the 100-foot buffer. And I apologize, Ernie, and I am more than happy to provide a revised plan here, but I didn't show the dry well. We can put dry wells on both sides of the house outside of the 50-foot buffer, which would be connected to gutters and downspouts, and I'm more than happy to provide a revised plan showing that, because I know you brought that up at the last meeting. So I'm going to be brief and answer any questions I can. Thank you.
Okay, Amy, is there?
And we have no lawn, James.
So no
We're gonna
field.
put that in the conditions.
But you got all our hot
So
buttons.
on.
And additionally, I've spoken with my client, and they understand that to repair the boardwalk and dock, we need to come back with a new notice of intent and filing for that purpose.
I have a couple things. One, I think it's great that you were able not only to get to a net zero in the 0 to 50, but to actually have a reduction. I think it does count. You are proposing an additional bit in the 50 to 100, but you are proposing a greater than 2 to 1 mitigation, and that does not include, I believe, the 8 new trees you're proposing. Again, the walkway and dock are not part of the application. I didn't see, am I missing it? I don't see was there a revised planting plan?
January, yes, and I have 3 sets with me.
January 15.
I have January 29 with me.
I don't have enough, yeah.
Okay.
Did you guys get?
No.
Okay, we didn't get
I
them.
thought she was going to send them electronically.
It's not in the Dropbox.
Okay.
We don't have it.
I
Not in the
could
packet.
have missed it.
No.
I'm not gonna say I
I-
didn't.
I
but
do
we
have-
We do, even if she sends it electronically, probably would had it, paper copy.
Well,
If I could have one, that would be great.
I-
Just
I
look at
brought-
it real quick.
I brought 3 with me.
You wanna maybe give a couple people ones to pass around, just real quick, just so we can check a few things, that's it? There's a need to lay anything here, so I just double check. Thank you. That's existing. Materials. So pending this, I mean, I'm sure if there's 1 or 2 little substitutions we can all agree on. But pending that, with all the conditions we normally mention, I would recommend approval.
And I'll provide a revised plan with the dry wells on it, Amy.
Or if the commission, we can do that, or if you don't want to have to necessarily do that, we can condition dry wells on both sides of the house outside the 50-foot buffer
Okay.
in the conditions. Same to me.
Carolyn?
I have a question. This existing well,
Yes.
shall be converted to an irrigation well?
Or
abandoned.
abandoned.
Well, I don't think we're gonna approve irrigation in this project, other than
For
your,
the, sorry.
other than the temporary above-ground 2-year.
Well, if it could be abandoned after the use of temporary irrigation, I'm fine with a condition to that effect. Or a condition abandoned,
This well is within the 0 to 50.
yes.
I don't know if it was ever.
I don't, we are tying into town water now. It goes down the road. That's kind of a standard note we put on plans for people, for the opportunity to, but I understand you don't allow irrigation, and if it could be used just for the temporary irrigation for the purposes of establishing the plantings, we would appreciate that.
And how would you draw the lines from that well to the plantings, which are?
Well, the line from the well already goes to the house, so we could hook into it.
From the well, this was the water for the house.
Yes, yeah. So we could hook into it, when we tear the house down, we could tap into that line. It really doesn't matter. I'm fine with abandoning it. It's just a standard note that we put on plans.
I would just recommend, for sake of monitoring and 2-3 years down the road, I would just recommend abandoning it.
That's fine.
At this point. Sorry.
That's all.
Would you like, again, would you need a revised plan for that, or can that be a condition?
Can also say existing well to be abandoned.
Okay,
That's a drilled well, right?
yes.
That's my only question.
Mark?
The only quirk I've got, David, is the degree of water that's gonna wind up coming off the patios on the back. You got a lot of hardscape out there. I would be partial to a trap along the perimeter. Just some insurance with a bed of
When
stone
you-
along the edge.
When you say trap, Mark, can you explain that a little bit to me?
Bed of stone along the perimeter. Because it looks
Okay.
to me there's a,
French drain.
of sorts, yeah, I mean, technically no, but
Yeah.
sort of. Between the 26 and the 28 grade lines, the topo lines that are there, by the time that patio comes out level, there's gonna be a grade differential, and there's gonna be some sort of a structure to carry the outer edge, and I
So
think
a
you're gonna
stone, a stone drainage trench.
That's not a patio as such, it's a raised deck.
Yeah, but underneath it, there's gonna be something.
Oh,
That ground's
okay.
not gonna just fall off.
Well, okay, are we still leaving the roof over the raised deck?
Well, we've eliminated, we've pulled the roof back,
Saw that, yeah.
so it no
Yeah, so it's
longer
a ridge.
cantilevers. Yes.
Right, it's right where the original,
So
where the
this-
current deck is.
But I think, are you referring to the steps over here, Mark, that go around the corner?
More so where the steppers are, from the base of the stairway.
Well,
Right here.
we have an opportunity to install a drainage trench there, and again, I'm fine revising a plan. We've come along.
couple decisions.
We've
here,
come a
so-
long way with this, and
Yep.
I'd prefer to dot the i's and cross the t's. I'm okay with that.
I would like to see
Yeah, let's.
Okay.
do
that taken
David.
care of, and the same thing right across the whole back. 'Cause depending on where you locate the dry wells and so forth, is gonna make a difference on the size and how that's all gonna work, 'cause there's not a lot of room to work there. It's gonna be tight.
Okay, and I'm comfortable with that. It'll make it easier for the contractor down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it, that's all, I'm good.
I have nothing.
Jim?
Yeah, no comments on it.
Ernie?
And I think my comment sort of mirrored what Mark was saying. So the roof that's over the existing uncovered deck, if I'm getting this all right, and both of the decks will be covered now.
They have roofs over them, yes, and they will be connected to gutters and downspouts, which will
Yep.
bring the stormwater outside the 50.
Perfect.
Yes,
Good.
and I'll show that on the plan. I will dash the lines in and show you that.
Great, good, thanks, Dave.
Amy? So with the change in plans, so we can't,
That's okay. I like coming here.
I think we can, as long as we're in agreement about what those plans are gonna say. I mean, so the things that I have are the dry wells, the existing well to be abandoned.
A stone
and the-
drainage
and the
trench.
stone drainage trench around the
And
perimeter.
I'll show the connection from the downspouts to the dry wells outside the 50.
I think those, as long as we have an understanding, those are easy enough that we can vote tonight, as long as David gets a revised plan in, within a week's time, so we can have it in time for when we do the orders. Fine with that. If you guys are.
I have no problem
Yeah,
with that.
it's not like changes to footprints
Okay.
and structure, it's
That'd be
small.
great.
And we don't have to come back again, David, for this.
So we would just,
And the abandonment of the well. Abandonment of the well.
Yep, the three things, the
Yep.
dry wells, the abandonment of the well, and the native stone trench.
so we'd make a motion with the revised plan to be submitted to you.
Yeah, within a week, please, David.
Of course.
So do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the notice of intent for 21 Deacon's Folly Road with the 3 changes in plan as previously noted.
Revised
And
plan.
revised plan submitted to Amy within a week.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Aye.
Abstain.
And I was gonna say, gee, our next
David, Ernie's got to abstain, 'cause he was-
notice of intent isn't here, but then I remember it's David again.
Yes, Ernie is now a full commissioner, not just an alternate.
No kidding.
So now we have is this for the next one, David?
Yes.
So we have a notice of intent for Taunton East LLC, Route 28, head of the Bay Road, for a screen porch and rebuild timber steps.
Again, David Little representing Taunton East LLC. I know most of you made it to the site because I saw you out there. So I took a couple of photos of the 2 areas in question that we are proposing work. As you're aware, this is a developed lot on Pleasant Bay, and the resource areas include land subject to coastal storm flowage and a coastal bank, and well south of this property, there is a vernal pool that we are well away from. What the owners would like to do would build a screen porch on a portion of the existing deck, and I've given you a photo of the deck. The portion in front of the slider would just be rebuilt in its existing footprint, and the screen porch would be located over the other portion. And then additionally, they would like to replace the timber steps. And that was my suggestion, only because I found them to be a little dangerous. And the way that I think we can do this and accomplish it in the footprint is we have some wide landings up at the top. So I think we can tighten it up a little bit here to gain a little bit more of a run in here where you don't have much area to work. But I did the math, and we can accomplish this between that and that with just moving some of these timbers closer up here and then giving us a little bit of an opportunity to have a longer run as you go down. So I didn't specify, but we understand that we would have to use non-CCA treated lumber for that. The screen porch is proposed to be built on 8 sonotube footings. I've added in the construction protocol, I noted that all work would be performed by hand, and any excess excavated material from the sonotube installation would be immediately removed from the site. It's a level lawn area. I think both projects can be accomplished with little or no disturbance to the site. And I took this picture because Amy pointed out, and I didn't realize it until I saw you there today, there are 2 or 3 branches on this tree that would have to be limbed for the construction of the porch, but the tree would not be impacted by that, I don't think. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, Amy.
So you would be using wood for the stairs, you're not going to stone?
Nope.
Okay.
We would be using 6x8 timbers.
Okay.
Which is what is there now.
Right. I may not even put it in anything, I just want to know. A little bit, we chatted about roof runoff, and that in this location, potentially a French drain around the structure would be more appropriate. It's up to the commission if you want dry wells or a French drain. For roof runoff, it is fairly flat. It does start to pitch a little bit as you get towards the steps. As long as the stairs stay in the same footprint and the screened-in porch is on sonotubes, it's not going on on any type of real foundation, and I would condition, that maybe it's not to become livable, habitable space. I would recommend approval of the project with those conditions. And I would just like to mention, and hopefully you can relate to your client, or we can in a letter, this is not having to do with this project, but the dock storage. It's kind of on native vegetation on the top of the bank near the driveway, and they have plenty of room to keep it on area that's not native vegetation. It's kind of in the shrubs in the woods there, some portions of it. So I know that the dock is not part of this project, but I figured it's worth bringing up. That's it.
Okay, Carolyn?
I don't have any thoughts now, other than the question again, taking a deck, then this deck is tightly built, which does have some drainage, and it also has some airspace, for lack of a better word, and putting a more substantial structure on it. But
We will be maintaining the space below it.
you will be maintaining.
It'll be built on sonotube footings, although it will be an impervious surface now versus pervious. And
Other than that, I don't have any questions.
Couple small things. In this application, I think a drain trench around the perimeter is a better application than dry well. And,
so stone at the roof drip line.
yep, that would be my preference versus the dry wells. And the stairway going up there, you were kind when you said treacherous. They're downright dangerous.
Well, they didn't even ask me to replace that, and I suggested that they should,
You
because
take your life in your hands going up and down there.
Right.
For the sake of longevity, I don't think it's ridiculous to consider changing that to granite slabs or a like stone product that's, already cut. Similar, the application would be virtually the same as the timber wall or the timber stairs. But what it would do is just take away the possibility of having to change it 15 years down the line, because they're not gonna rot.
John Goff is the contractor that retained me to do this, and he's the one that suggested the timber again. if we have to come back, we'll come back with a new filing, but we would prefer timber here.
Well, we can also put in the conditions that it can be, if the commission wants, to let it be either or. As long as it's in the same footprint, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I would advise that, just for the sake of the
As long as
opportunity.
it's in the same footprint, whether it's stone
Yeah.
or wood,
Right,
doesn't matter to,
no harm, no foul. That's all.
John?
No comments.
Yeah, this will have our lawn and fertilizer regs
yeah.
for the property now, for the area within the 100-foot buffer zone.
Did you get an email in support of this?
I did. I didn't print it out.
That's okay.
We have
I
a-
just,
we have
Oh,
a
you
letter
do, you
from the
have it in your
neighbor.
Dropbox. Good job,
We have a-
Nikki.
We have a letter from the neighbor,
Okay,
the
I
next
just-
door neighbor who loves them.
Yes.
thank you.
I didn't put it in the paper packets.
Yeah, I have really no substantive comments. One question is, and we talked about it today when we were on site, the existing stairs going down are about 3 feet wide.
Mhm.
Our regs allow up to 4 if they wanted to. We're talking about staying in the existing footprint. I mean, if you wanted to go an extra foot, are we comfortable with that? I personally am.
Thought about that after. My only concern would be it would impact, if there would be any new impacts to the roots of those 2 trees on the other side.
I've become a little gun shy in proposing
Expansion
new
to 50.
expansion in the 0 to 50, so
Yeah.
I recommend to my clients to build them 3 feet wide again.
That's fine. Just made a comment,
Yeah,
that's
I
all.
thought, I looked
think
at,
that's sufficient.
I think 3 feet's fine for the, I mean, you would risk having impact to any roots if you went wider here.
And
Fine.
disturbance.
Other than that, I have no comments. Looks fine.
I had 2 comments. One was, I agree with Amy that the porch doesn't become livable. And my question, I know it says screen, but it's not gonna be like with windows or.
No, this isn't-
Literally screen, I know it said screen, so I'm just
No,
wanna
this is-
confirm that.
This is definitely screened. It's not intended to be 3-season. They really only use the house in the summertime.
Okay.
So it's only gonna be used as a screen porch.
Yeah. And it's
We're
not-
fine with a condition to that effect.
Right, okay. And then, it's not an issue for you, but we did note that dock storage that was
Yeah.
in the area,
I'll put something together, either like a letter to the owner, separate letter to the owner, or include something with this, just to talk about that it should be stored.
in a better
Just in an
location.
existing disturbed area rather than kind of in the woods edge, that's
Okay.
all.
At least it's in an upland area.
True.
Right. And again, because you were a little leery when Mark mentioned the stone, we weren't saying you had to, we were just giving you the option.
Thank
to
you.
Make it
Yeah.
easier, that's all. So, do I have a motion?
I would move to accept the proposal for 2071 Head of the Bay Road.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
And you'll put the conditions in we spoke of?
Yes,
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
thanks.
You need a break, Amy?
No, I may need to stand up. I don't think it's strange if I just need to stand instead of sit.
Next we have an order of conditions for Richmere Harbor Club.
One thing I did realize is when I did the amendment, I didn't include that there's a 3rd site plan, and that has stayed the same. It's the site and drainage details plan. The drainage system has not changed. The site plan and landscape plan has changed to take out the synthetic turf. And we just got that, so I don't know if your plans, we don't have plans for you online. Ow. Cardboard cut practically. we have new site plans that show natural lawn areas instead of synthetic lawn areas, so. Go to one.
I have a question on number 4
Yep.
on the amended.
I do too.
Was that, was that specific to that hearing, or, because the language is a little different than our normal language?
Are we restricting the herbicides, fertilizer, pesticides to lawn area and not their flower beds?
Oh, it shouldn't have said lawn area, it just said it should any areas within the 100-foot buffer or the commission jurisdiction, but.
Okay.
Well, that's, so I knew there would be discussion about this one, and I kind of wanted to leave it open.
The other part of that, I think it is, I've talked about it a few times, but to have that be really standardized, because when you change it a little bit, so if this was approved, I mean, I think it could be construed to saying that's allowing organic fertilizer, you know, because it's non-chemical. Because
Yeah.
It's,
I don't know why I didn't just, I do.
it's really just, you know, it's fertilizers,
Fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's probably the most
I don't know why.
straightforward as far as the legal way to say something like
Right.
that.
Should we including but not limited to organic?
Well, if it specifies chemical treatment,
Oh,
I'm
and
gonna
says
say,
any and all chemical treatment,
so,
that would include any and all.
any areas within
I'm good.
conservation jurisdiction.
It's supposed to include, like, even manure is like not a chemical, right, so.
I think if we just say fertilizers,
Yeah, I
that
think you
covers
just say
it.
fertilizers, I don't think,
Or you could just take out the word chemical, too.
I did, yeah, I crossed that out.
yeah.
Well, but if you consider, depending on how the manure is applied, depending on the application, how does that apply to compost?
I guess it would depend what type of compost, but I think, you know, I think there's a pretty good accepted definition of what a fertilizer is. I mean, you know, some composted soil, I wouldn't consider fertilizer, I don't think Amy would.
No, I wouldn't either.
But like straight manure, I think, you know, I would
Yeah.
consider fertilizer.
So if you want to be really tight about it, you could include a specific amount of nitrogen per square foot or whatever, or any, I mean,
I don't think, I think it's just a mistake to put in, I think we've actually had it right the whole time, but
We
to
have, I don't know
to
why I
to
didn't
put
cut and
chemical
paste.
treatment, because then you're basically just saying that only chemical fertilizers are prohibited. And so we
Right.
just need to remove that first part.
Yep, I took it out.
Exactly like it was.
So this would then mean, this is an amended order. Our previous order, which you see the special conditions from the first one, talks about, number 11, the property owner shall become compliant with the regulations. So, in effect, this now says that they just can't do it within jurisdictional area. It's not that they have to become, or, you know, get approval for an alternative means, which is what the other one said, or become completely compliant. This now says the entire area within conservation jurisdiction, there is no fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides.
so we take out number 11?
No, you have to leave it, because you can't, you're not changing this, all the other special conditions, but the amended one supersedes it.
Okay.
Number 11 was exactly how it was beforehand.
Yep, and why I didn't cut and paste, I don't know.
so, but as a note, they made it pretty clear that they were considering coming back and,
Yeah,
Asking for the other thing, they
that's
can.
their right, though, right?
right.
They can ask to amend it, and that would change, and that, it could potentially change again.
Okay, but this condition shall remain in perpetuity and shall not be released by a certificate of compliance.
It should, but
But
you can amend it, they can amend it if you permit it.
It can be released by an amendment,
Yeah, you can change
an
that.
action of the.
Yeah, I mean, anyone
action
can come
of
in
the
for a new
committee-
notice of
commission.
intent at any time.
We can change it, but they can't.
They can request it. Okay.
It looks good to me.
I'll make those changes.
Okay, so,
And again, I don't have a signature page.
Do we have to vote?
yeah,
Yes.
so I approve, make a motion to approve the order of conditions for Witchmere Harbor Club, 23 Snowin Road, amended OOC.
Second.
Seconded by John. All in favor? Aye.
I have to get a signature page. I don't know what's going on, but a signature page for that one I will. Don't leave here without signing this later. After we finish the orders and the extensions, before we go into the public hearing for wetlands, I'll run and get a signature page for this order, so you don't have to come back and sign it on your own time. Would you like to do the extension
Yep.
permit?
So now I have a request for extension permit for 39 Strandway, Erie, and Riva Fishman.
So this was for pool and landscape changes, and they came back to do some small home renovations. I am batting 1,000 here tonight. Oh my God. I'm fine. Rolled my ankle.
Oh dear. These chairs are dangerous.
Yeah, I'm all right. Okay.
On TV.
That's okay.
Remember, we got that recorded,
show.
Amy, too.
What was that? Oh, that's
Oh,
fine.
good.
Thank you, Caleb, though. All right, so extension permit for the Fishmans. The second phase is not yet complete. This has been active for 3 years. They would like another 3-year extension to finish the work and to install their plantings. And we told them, you know, they have to have a few growing seasons under their belts for the sort of compliance. So they would like a 3-year extension. And I would recommend it.
Any comments, Carolyn?
We give them 2 growing seasons, 3 growing seasons. Can we change this to a 2-year extension?
You could. Let me look real quick at what the. Let me look real quick at the letter again.
It seems a project like this should be finished within 5 years.
You can, yeah, I mean,
Project
you
like
asked
this
for
would be-
3, you can give them 2.
Yeah.
It doesn't say specifically what,
I guess the question is,
what is still needed to be done with the home renovations.
and when it would be completed.
Right.
Has anyone been to the site or?
It's mostly interior stuff, from what I understand, that they're not finished with.
So why do they need an extension from us then, if they're
The
just,
plantings and the project itself is, as a whole, is not done.
but interior work shouldn't be holding up planting, right?
Maybe we should give a time limit on getting the plantings done. Rather than, if the project's substantially done, but they haven't done the plantings, they should probably go in the spring or,
This spring or fall, the latest.
yeah, I mean, it's,
And that would put them on track for getting a cert of compliance, so you know, a year later.
I mean, if it was almost done, they really should go in the spring.
Yeah, right. You could do a 2-year extension and plantings to be done this spring. Spring 2020. And if they have an issue with that, they can bring it up to you.
Amy, when is the permit the first permit expire? What is the,
It expires February 15th.
this year?
Next.
Oh, okay. So, the project, so they hadn't been able to do the planting, so we'd have to require at least
They need an extension
Two
of some sort,
of some sort,
yeah.
at least, like Carolyn says, at least at 2 years.
Yep. I would say.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of requiring the plantings for this spring unless there's some compelling reason not to, because it's,
Well, if the pool area has not been finished,
is that what it says?
no, doesn't.
We don't know.
I'll ask. If they have an issue with doing the plantings this spring, they need to let us know.
Yeah.
So, do we have to continue this?
Nope, you can vote. I would recommend with the discussion we had, a 2-year extension and the plantings to be done in spring 2020. And if they have an issue with that, they can come talk to you.
Okay, I'll move to approve the request for extension with a 2-year limit and with the planting done in the spring of this year.
Second.
I have a question.
Is there any
on
question?
this. I have a question on this. This is February. Do they have enough time to get a landscape architect together to put these plantings together?
They have a
And
planting plan.
They already have, the plan is done.
Plan's done, yep.
And they should have a landscape architect who drew it up.
Mhm.
So they do have enough time to,
Yeah.
if the land is ready.
Yeah, we approved this with a planting plan.
That's a good point.
And I have another question before we vote, or
That's-
to qualify 2 planting seasons is this year and the next.
Growing seasons, there's technically 2 in a year. There's a spring growing season and a fall growing
Oh, so
season.
2 years would be more than enough then to qualify
Well,
for the 2?
we did talk about sometimes 2 growing seasons is not enough to really
enough.
see how the plants are gonna do. So we talked about maybe starting to change our language from 1 to 2 growing seasons to 1 to 2 years. 2 years.
But I'm saying, but this was 2 growing seasons, right?
Right.
So that would theoretically be 4 growing seasons within the 2
Plenty
years.
of time, but still.
Plenty of time, that's what I'm,
And, it's just, what you're doing is giving a little more of a tighter time frame to get this stuff done. you
Right.
know, Just to see the project get
no, I
finished.
was just worried that it might be not enough. So the fact that it's 4 growing seasons within 2
Should be
years, that
plenty
should
of
be
time.
plenty of time, is what I was getting at.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the motion, it's been seconded, any,
I'll second.
more-
Oh,
any,
we're-
no, it's
so
already
we
been done,
have-
I'm just, this is more discussion. Any more discussion?
No, no more
Okay.
discussion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Please sign. Actually, my back is hurting more than but my back
Yeah,
may
that
be.
didn't help you anymore.
That did not help
No.
my situation, but that's okay.
Well, now you have-
Well, we gotta,
Now I can get an MRI.
Sorry.
It's on-
They wouldn't let me get one
Sorry.
before for my other injury that had nothing to do with work.
so we,
Anyway,
It's work-related now.
Yeah.
I didn't do that on purpose, I swear.
No.
so we have a
Yes, we have a cert of compliance.
request for certificate of compliance for Mark Corliss, 254 Bank Street.
The Corlisses are selling their house, and they would like to close this out, so it's not a hindrance on the deed. They did the pool, they did not do the garage or fence. We went out there and looked at things. Everything is, with the pool is as per plan. Fence and garage were never done, and this would close out the permit, so if the new homeowner wanted to do that or something else, they would have to obviously file with you. So, a little bit more than half, Nikki and I looked at, a little more than half of the mitigation plantings were done and are doing well. They've been in for about 2 years now, or a little more. Since less than half the work was done, I don't think it's a big deal that the entire mitigation plantings weren't done because the fence, which was the biggest topic of discussion, was the fence at that hearing,
Right.
wasn't done. So I would recommend granting the certificate of compliance, and I will put the words together that well, actually, granting the certificate of compliance basically means the new owners are starting with a clean slate. I have to see the ongoing conditions about, hold on one second, if we want to have any ongoing conditions for this one. Give me a quick second.
And did the fertilizer reg make it on that one?
Let's see, that was
Not sure.
back in early 18.
It was just before you started, I think. Yeah.
That's the one that was tested, right? Because it
Have they built
took too long.
No, it
took
is,
too
it's
long.
within the, no fertilizers, herbicides, pests, any of those, within the 100-foot buffer. And we've been out there, they haven't.
How did the mitigation plantings, I'm always interested to see whether that appears to be being naturalized in that area as it should, or?
It is. So what they did, and I will say it was a site change that I made with the Corlisses. There was supposed to be just a very formal line, and in some areas, when you actually went on site, it made sense. They have a line, but for the most part, but they also have clumps in some areas. So they haven't. There's no lawn underneath those. It's just whatever, natural mulch from the trees that comes down. Ground covers are starting to grow up around them. It really is, it's naturalizing, and the plants are healthy. So
There was some pretty manicured lawn on that property, I think, somewhere.
there is, but they have, I looked at it, we see a little bit of new stuff coming in, so I don't think they're treating it, and they're not fertilizing.
It's always a little hard to say, but we gotta try
Right.
and,
I think the
You
geese are fertilizing it.
yeah. Natural fertilizer.
Yeah.
All right.
So if we give them a certificate of compliance for a pool,
Mhm.
but they haven't put in the pool.
They did the pool.
Oh, they did the pool.
They did
have
not do the garage and the fence.
The garage and the fence. Okay, but so we're giving them a certificate of compliance for a garage and a fence.
No, we're not. We're saying we're gonna say those were not done,
Okay,
and are not,
that's my point.
no longer approved.
That's my point.
Like, this closes the permit out, so the
Closes the
new
permit.
homeowner, if they want a garage fence, they have to reapply with you.
Got it.
Any other questions?
I'm satisfied with that.
Make a motion to approve the request for a certificate of compliance for Mark Corliss, 254 Bank Street.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You sign.
Hey, Amy, before we go to the discussion, we had the minutes too, should
Yeah,
we?
would you mind doing the minutes?
No,
And
that's
if you
what
have
I
any
was gonna suggest.
corrections, write them in. I'm gonna go print out, a signature page for the Winchmere.
Where are the minutes?
I only have the minutes on my lockbox. I don't have
Oh, a paper copy? I have one paper copy.
And then, on the minutes, you have 2 dates showing.
Yeah, so
again-
whatever one that's in the Dropbox, or
Right,
whatever. I
is-
only have one, January 8th.
Right, is the other one was from like ancient history.
Is it in Dropbox
Yeah.
It's in mine.
Yeah.
for February 5th?
No, January 8th.
January.
It's in the
Well, in February 5th, yeah, January 8th minutes.
Where,
Down at the bottom, after the order, Witchmere.
it's not on Carolyn's.
Huh.
Why don't you use mine? And,
Yeah, mine doesn't have everything that yours has.
See, I stopped
They
with
don't get
the
updated.
minutes of which.
yeah, maybe, did
time
you,
to time, it's just not
I don't know what, if
I
you
just went
refresh
into
it?
You
today.
You just went into it today, interesting.
I'm using this.
All right,
Do you have the wetlands bylaws?
Doesn't matter.
I do, yeah, she has the wetlands bylaws.
Yeah, because I have,
I didn't
it's
update today.
shown between, well, P was amended order and then Q was January 8th.
Doesn't have a Q,
Okay.
it's weird. I'm gonna go to signature page, she's got the paper copy here, if you wanna take a minute.
So, yes, please, because I,
I'll be right back.
you okay?
Oh, are you reading?
If you, want- I mean, we're early tonight, so if you wanna take a few minutes to look them over, it's fine.
I have one little change. Are you making the notes, Carolyn,
She's got the,
or is?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. It's on the Witchmere Harbor Club.
All right, I didn't get that.
this one got weird now on me.
Yeah, I'm not sure which.
Where's Witchmere Harbor Club?
It's our request for amended order of conditions for Witchmere Harbor Club.
Okay. Yep.
where it says about in the middle of the paragraph, Donovan doesn't see a difference in turf versus any other type of pervious patio. I had said plastic turf.
Okay.
Which I stand by that comment.
Yeah.
Are you taking the changes, Carolyn?
That was the only change I did.
Okay,
Yes.
under the 5 Brooks Road,
Okay.
there's the third sentence talks about a new cap will be placed on the wall for safety purposes.
A new cap would be, yes.
It says purposed.
Okay.
I got another one. Under Fragmentary Borden, the last sentence before the bold motion, the dead pine tree is allowed to be flush cute.
Right, we hear that.
Saw
I
that
see
one.
that. A dead pine tree is allowed to be,
No E.
No E.
okay, got it.
Oh, yeah, Microsoft Word doesn't identify that as a problem, either, does it?
Under Deacon's Folly, too, if you have that one. Struggling with this, and right in the middle of the paragraph, there's a sentence that says, this is a very shady site, so the removal of the tress, and it should be trees. Find that?
set?
Okay.
Here. Carolyn, you all set?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Make a motion to approve the minutes for the meeting for January 8th, 2020.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
One
Thank you
abstention.
very much.
What?
Got it.
You said one abstention.
One abstention, yeah.
All right.
Ernie.
Oh. Okay. All right, please sign the order for Winchmere. We gotta call that file. Get rid of stuff we don't need. Don't need much on the synthetic turf right now, because that's not.
Do this.
Might come back.
As long as we do that, we can head into, well, Stan will have to read the, once we're all done signing, the public hearing for the bylaw discussion.
Do we close this hearing?
No, 'cause it's not executive session.
Nope.
You just need to announce it as if you would a notice of intent.
Sitting here with about it, worried.
We did, two people, two of the consultants that and engineers that I sent this to did provide comment. One I didn't have a chance to really incorporate, I brought it with me though. So,
Okay, Amy, should I? Okay.
yep, ready.
Okay, next we have a public hearing. The Harwich Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing regarding proposed changes to the Harwich Wetlands Protection Bylaw in preparation for articles to be voted on at the May 2020 town meeting.
So I tried to take what some of you sent me. Brad also commented, and I incorporated everything that he said with the exception of the discussion that I anticipate we're gonna have about the size requirement for a regulatable wetland. When we get to that, I'll happily discuss his thoughts there with you. I wasn't gonna, so I also did, I have one extra copy of the regulations in case people want it. Again, we're talking about the bylaw. We are not discussing the regulations tonight, but if people want to see kind of the difference between the two, the bylaw is a overarching document, and then the regulations get into the specifics for resource areas, things like that. So, bylaw is meant to be for more broad topics. In addition to this, I will be incorporating, with your blessing, an in lieu fee language, and you will have that within a day or two. I just have to finish writing it up. But essentially, I guess we might as well just talk about it now before we get into the document. We would be able to accept in lieu fees into our wetlands account. And what we could then do, but then I would request that you talk to the we would be on the selectmen's meeting to adjust our annual allotment of, we are allowed to use up to $6,000 a year out of our wetlands account. That's generated by filing fees, the town portion of filing fees, with potential of in lieu fees. If we did generate some in lieu fees for projects, and you wanted to use it on a larger project, either we'd have to petition the selectmen to use the extra money, or we could ask for the cap to be raised on that. We already have a line item that allows for that we could change the language to that line item in our budget.
How much have we used in past years, Amy?
Couple thousand, like 3,000 a year at most.
We've never come close to the 6.
No, the reason I think it got capped is obviously filings trend with the economy. When I first got here in 2011 in my previous job, I mean, in Eastham, during the recession, we didn't make hardly anything. maybe 3,000 a year. Now, last year we brought in 12. So, when I came here, that account was actually in the red, and we had to make up for that. So I think there was maybe a bit of a hesitation to kind of allow carte blanche using of that account, but we've kept a very tight look at it, and right now, we have over $40,000 in that account.
Which could really be used.
Which could really be used, I mean, for anything that the Wetland Protection Act really covers, so.
Could be used potentially in like Bank Street, or not, sorry, not Bank Street, the Bell's Neck area to restore around the parking lot or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, wetland, your buffer zone restoration projects. We've used it a lot for consulting, or, you know, or project review, things like that, but.
Well, if you did have a big project that you wanted to spend it on, so the.
It's probably gonna be, yeah, a lot of money anyway.
Pardon?
Sorry, it's gonna be more than 6,000.
No, what I'm saying is, can you just get approval from the selectmen?
You could, we don't have to ask to have that number bumped up to anything. You could just, once you took in the fees and you had a specific thing you wanted to use it for, you could ask. I
Rather than-
don't, but again, it's
Rather-
really your decision on what you're gonna use those fees for. You know, if you took in lieu fee, I would be a little bit wary, because if you accept in lieu fees to allow for new construction in the 50 somewhere, and then you wanted to use it to restore a wetland or a buffer zone elsewhere, that should be your decision. Rather than having to then ask to be able to use that money. So that's the only thing that's why I'm.
Well, the money certainly shouldn't go to the general fund.
No, it will not.
I think it can't,
No,
basically. Yeah.
right.
Well,
it
let me
can't.
ask you a question. Even with the current spending of, what'd you say, 6,000?
Oh, yeah, we're allowed to spend 6,000
Yeah.
without asking for.
So
More.
what's the approval process of doing anything within that 6,000? I mean, how,
We put it, I mean, you essentially direct me.
oh,
If we
so
wanna have
it's
a study, it's an agenda item, you know,
so we grant the approval for
Yep.
you to authorize that, we authorize that spending.
And that's 6,000 a year, huh?
I mean, if this came to be and it was actually used a few times a year, there might be, you know, $100,000 coming in from that or something.
Right.
I mean, the in lieu fee should be, so say someone wanted to, you know, disturb 5,000 square feet of buffer zone, it should be the equivalent to restore, like a brownfield site to that, including the years of maintenance, or to help purchase a property. So it's, you know, we're not talking a few $100s, talking,
Right.
you know,
It's a
15,
lot of money.
25, whatever that would cost in today's market, you know.
but I
So-
wanted to let you know where it's gonna go. I mean, the language is gonna, I'm gonna finish it tomorrow, so.
Most in lieu fees go, you know, in the state of Massachusetts to land purchasing and wetland restoration.
Right.
That's what they are used for.
I think that's a great
Or
use. so.
replication. Yeah.
So I missed that in the beginning, so where is that in the bylaws?
This is in the
In
regulations.
the regulations,
Yeah.
Yeah.
to change the spending limit? Okay.
So not related to what we're getting into right now.
Sorry, I
And
just
do
wanted
we-
to bring it up
And
to
do
you.
we have to go to town to change the regulations?
No, you have to have a public meeting, so that will, it just has to be a public meeting. You can do that anytime soon.
Obviously.
I will double check with Carol about that tomorrow, because the wetlands account was established as a revolving fund by town meeting, I do wanna check on that. If we were to change the language of that account to reflect acceptance of in lieu fees.
On that.
So that may not be a wetland bylaw change, that might be a different article change when we talk about revolving funds at town meeting. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about the
Okay.
semantics as much, we'll get that done. What were you gonna say?
It's not relevant to this discussion,
Okay.
but just, my thing shut off because I hadn't touched it.
Ah,
When I brought it back up.
What do you need?
When I brought it back up, the minutes showed up.
oh, you just probably just needed to refresh. That's interesting, though. All right. Sorry, I digressed. I wanted to let you know about
Because-
that, though.
And when you did that, I'm confused now still. I almost want to talk about that more, but I don't want to.
Sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up tonight. So to the bylaw, it says, I don't have any more copies, but I think I handed out, you all out copies of this anyways. So it's up to you how you want to go through this.
I
You
believe
s-
this is it.
If you have changed, so strikeouts or omissions are struck through. Additions are in red. Of course, there's still, if you want to change anything else that hasn't been changed, now's your time to do it. We do have to have this in the 14th, so we do not have another meeting between now and then. Brad did say, if we all come to a decision, a consensus tonight, that he is fine with going forward without him. And again, his changes have to do with the size requirement for wetlands. You wanna just go page by page?
Yeah, why don't, I was going to suggest where we've got
Yeah.
the,
That would be best.
like the cross-outs
Yeah,
or the additions.
But if you do have anything that didn't get incorporated and you wanted to, let me know. I'm gonna quickly look,
First one was under agricultural,
okay?
it says we're crossing out non-agricultural activities in or within the 100 feet of resource area shall not have a significant effect on the existing.
I think that kinda goes without saying too.
Yeah, that was my change, Stan.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong
Yeah,
in the definition.
no, so I'm just,
Same comment under
So we're-
aquaculture.
Same thing with
Yeah,
aquaculture, yeah.
yeah,
I
the
think that's a
reason
good
for those.
change. I think it's
so,
not necessary.
so that's okay. And then,
Did I hear that Orleans has included fishing operations or within agriculture?
Should be within aquaculture. I don't know. I don't know if
That-
they have or haven't.
That, I just heard it on the radio. Would that allow more activity within 100 feet of a resource area?
Because I don't know what it is. I can't say.
It might be
And-
something we look into for next year.
And, yeah,
Orleans made some change to, for fishing activities, to put them under agricultural activity.
seems strange.
so that one's okay.
All right, so,
So the next one was on the top of page 3, again, crossing out the activities under aquaculture. Same thing. So then we get into the coastal bank, the word, the cumulative effect, the first paragraph is what's there, Amy? And
no, the
then-
first paragraph is a change. That was my suggested change upon reading others.
The effect of in red, that first? Okay.
And then Brad's suggestion is underneath.
As I read that section underneath, to me, that becomes a little bit contentious, because to me, that's the bantering of opinion between the applicant and the commission. I'm not sure there's any clarity there from what I'm understanding.
So it's giving it's making clear that the burden of proof is on the applicant. A part of it, I agree, it's a little bit wordy.
I kind of like putting the last sentence with the first
Yeah, that's
definition.
kind of what I was thinking, yeah.
And, yeah, so a little bit of both. So with the when requested is responsibility of the applicants to demonstrate cumulative effects, I would move that section of Brad's up to the one I wrote, or that I put. Does that make sense?
And then eliminate Brad's for the first couple of sentences?
So,
Take yours and then add the last sentence, and that's it.
I'd be happy with that, yeah.
I have a concern that I think is similar to Mark's, that you're mixing, this is just a definition section. And you're
Right.
mixing in requirements with the definitions, which
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
me, I mean, if this can be said, or it perhaps is already said elsewhere,
It could be put in the regulations somewhere.
Yeah,
but
we
if-
could do
if
that
we're
too.
gonna- I
Do
mean, I
we-
agree, definitions are definitions, they're not
Cumulative
regulations.
effect
yeah.
is a
exactly.
cumulative
Yeah.
effect.
Do we refer to the term cumulative effect elsewhere in the bylaws?
I'd have to read them again.
In the regulations, I believe so, but
Yeah, but these
That
don't,
would
this
probably-
doesn't govern
So,
the regulations,
I'm just gonna
does
put
it?
regs there, because anytime, I agree with you, definition,
yeah, definitely.
then any explanation of a definition should be in the reg. If there needed to be a further explanation of that, it should be fleshed out in the regs.
So we would leave it as with the change that you, with the first paragraph.
If you
Rather
are
than
okay
Brad's.
with that, yes.
And if you could just make a note to look at that with the regulations
Yep, I already
later.
did,
Yeah.
but regs,
Because I definitely want to have this somewheres, because I agree with Brad here, is that it's just like other things, we become, what's subjective?
right.
And if we're going to require, I don't want to get into a match with somebody else. If we need to do it, then that's their responsibility, not ours.
Sure.
So we're just taking the first sentence, the first paragraph, not the
Mhm.
second.
Right.
Above, so all of this Brad's definition is going out.
I'll check to see if it's more applicable. Brad's suggestion is more applicable in the regulations. All right?
Well, either way, it's coming out.
Yeah, the bylaw.
Yeah.
All except for the last sentence, correct?
No, I meant
No, the whole thing.
where it says in bold, cumulative effect.
In other words, right here, this first
That's staying.
paragraph is staying,
Then Brad's is,
and all of this
Going.
underneath is going.
Into the regulations.
the first one is not, is what other towns have.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a definition. Let's just leave it as a definition and
Peter.
address the regulations in the regulations, I guess.
Okay. Makes sense.
Anything else on that page? Good. We didn't have a definition for shellfish.
yeah, that's tough.
Thought it should go in there.
I would put it in alphabetical order, though.
Or by size.
Just, it's a nit.
I think they are in alphabetical order. Is that what you were saying?
No.
They should be, they actually
shellfish-
are.
Shellfish belongs under.
Clams, conch,
Under
oh,
s-
shellfish, okay, but
under
I'm like, the actual
recreation.
shellfish in there are in alphabetical order.
Yes.
All right, alphabetized.
Oh,
Yes.
stick shellfish
I don't,
behind recreation.
that was a mistake. All right, I was trying to do that the whole time, but
They are
Must have-
alphabetized.
I must have, had a, all right, so if we go farther down, a no disturb zone, this is where Dan Croto from Moran Engineering had some comments. So, he said under both, definitions of no disturb zone and 60-foot no new structure zone, I don't know what else to call that, it is not clear if there are exemptions for riverfront, vernal pool, and floodplain. I would say vernal pool should definitely not be exempt.
Right.
And
But riverfront area
the
should be
riverfront
exempt.
area has its own very specific set of performance standards. So whether it's exempt from the,
I mean, it's not exempt from
no,
that at all. It just has something that goes further than that.
right.
The
But for
the
floodplain-
floodplain should not have a buffer zone, though, in my opinion.
I agree.
I agree with that.
And I think we should make that clear, so no floodplain, so we could just say does not include floodplain. Include land subject to coastal storm flowage,
Right.
okay?
Amy, under number 1, I know I suggested you add or reconstruction of an existing permitted structure, but I would also caveat that within this, with the words within the same footprint or something.
Okay,
Otherwise, you'd build a mega mansion.
gotcha.
So, in 60-foot no new structure, the last sentence is completely redundant with existing language in 310-4D, which has been crossed out, but I think in content it's redundant. It doesn't belong there, basically. It's redundant with the new section of 310-4.
If it's already covered somewhere else, we can take it out here.
It's covered in the variance language.
All right.
Yeah, the variant, it's word for word
Yeah.
from existing variance
Yep.
language and covered in the.
Maybe I just meant to be extra clear, but if it's redundant, we can strike it.
Can we just step back on that 60-foot issue for a moment? When that whole thing was
All right.
developed here at the inception, my understanding was what that represented was a 10-foot buffer zone between the 50 going outward. So if you have a building, hypothetically,
You were at 50, and there was a 10-foot additional, I'm sorry, I shouldn't.
right, so
Those
you still got a
egress.
50-foot no disturb zone, but if you are gonna have an additional 10 feet to be able to get around the structure, that's what that's for.
And I don't think we're using it that way.
No, I don't think we are at all. I think that's gotten to a point where it's got misconstrued, and I think there's been some cases where maybe things have happened that shouldn't have happened.
Right.
And I have some concern about that.
So, I'm sorry, what is it you think has happened that shouldn't have happened?
You got a 50-foot no disturb zone. That 10-foot that brings it to 60, that 10-foot was intended to be a buffer, basically a workspace between no disturb and
Structure.
a structure.
Allow people to
Okay.
access around their home. Allow people to get to
Right.
be able to walk
Because,
around their home.
well, because the problem we were running into, people were at the 50,
Approaching
they'd
into
be
it.
right on the
Absolutely.
corner of the 50, and we
Right.
say, you
Right.
had,
Right,
Right.
which makes sense. Makes sense to have the available space to be able to work on your building or whatever the structure happens to be. But I think what's happened is we've gotten away from that, and I think it's got misinterpreted. And 50 feet has become 60 feet, and then it becomes an argument that nobody really wins.
right.
And I think we need to address that and get on top of it.
So what we really
not
want to
sure what
say
this
is that we wouldn't allow a new structure within that 10 feet
What you're
that would,
saying.
that would impede people traversing that, through that area. For example, you could put a walkway in there. We're excluding walkways. Walkways would be permitted because it's,
Why wouldn't
It's
you
the
have a
buffer.
walkway?
You
But I
could
mean,
have a-
suppose you want to have a seating area right there.
yeah.
A ground level seating area, or a patio of some sort.
Yeah, you couldn't have a outdoor shower, you can't have a shed, you can't have buildings.
Fence.
You can't have fences.
Right.
Stuff like that, retaining walls perhaps, anything that, other than, you might even want to say, other than walkways.
Well, why can't you have a shower?
Because you can't walk through a shower.
You can walk around.
You got a 10-foot wide shower, it's gonna, you got your building at the 60, you got your 50-foot no disturb, and you put a 10-foot shower in
Well, who
between.
needs a 10-foot shower?
Well, I'm not saying you do, but I'm saying it's possible. That house we looked at
We
today
may
had
have
a
said- we
10-foot
may have
shower
seen
on the
one
outside.
today.
So, I mean, it's possible. So what you want is something that would allow people to transit that area.
Yeah, but that comes to my point of 50 feet now becomes 60 feet.
No, 50 feet is no disturb. You can't put a walkway in the 50 feet, or a patio in the 50 feet, or something like that.
Can't even cut in the 50 feet.
Can't touch it, but
You can't touch
that
it.
60-foot, can have landscaping, it can have an informal walkway. That was the point, is just to, if there's just such a strong tendency when you have a structure to end up, going a little bit beyond it for maintenance or walking or
Sure.
just some reason. And that's,
Would you allow a fence?
No.
in certain situations, I
With
think.
the
Well,
10
maybe
feet
to keep
off?
the no disturb zone a no disturb zone,
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, why not?
Split
Why
rail.
why wouldn't you do that? You could do it before there was a notice,
That's-
60.
That would give you a pure delineation of your 50-foot buffer if somebody put a fence there.
Right.
Oh, I see what you're
Marked
saying.
off their plot.
So the fence would be between the,
But I agree with what Mark's saying. Now we say, no, you can't put a fence in there because it's within the 60.
Yeah, yeah. I've suggested at times split rail fences for the 50, because I actually like them
Right.
for that purpose. and-
Do a good job of telling
well,
people you shouldn't.
why,
do it.
why can't we say something that you can't put a new structure in the 60 that would impede transit of that space?
Fine.
I mean, that's
Well,
what we're looking for,
That's
right?
reasonable, yeah.
Yeah. A
'cause
fence that's
it-
along the 50 feet, that's not gonna impede the
But
transit
going
of that
back
space.
into,
That
should
means
this
you could
be a
put a
bylaw?
patio.
The what?
That means you could put a patio.
Yeah,
Well, we were
You
trying
could,
to avoid the
with,
patios.
with
'cause-
mitigation.
Well, it's just that there was just such a strong tendency when someone did that, and that's where I think Brad kind of drove this new regulation, was that they just saw over the years, whenever somebody went near the 50, it would end
Gradual
up going
creep.
more like the 40.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Yeah.
was just the, but it's not meant to keep people from walking or maintaining
Right.
their home or landscaping it.
Yeah, but I think our whole focus was that people were building a structure right on the 51-yard foot.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
right.
Right on the fit, right
Yeah.
at 50.
But potentially
And our
including patios.
our goal is to just put a 10-foot buffer to allow people
Right,
to
so if there's-
walk between the 50 and the structure.
As long as we've got language in there that says essentially it needs to be open enough to get around,
Yeah.
to not have anything that's gonna be a detriment to its intended purpose.
You know,
So what if we say no new structure that would,
well, going back to right above us, aren't we really arguing about the 50-foot as being no disturb zone?
No.
No.
10-foot after. The 50-foot no disturb zone is no disturb, that hasn't changed.
Right.
But the amount in question is the 10-foot buffer,
what to allow within that?
right.
Right.
So
And
if you
should
can
that be
build
in
a
the
house of-
bylaw?
It is in the bylaw.
No, should that be part of the bylaw?
Yeah, because it's you do have to define what that means here.
Yeah.
That's what, and this is.
I went
Okay,
back
I'm
and
ju- I'm
forth
just
on it too.
questioning.
I went back and forth on that too, Stan, about whether it gets so particular, should it belong in a bylaw?
Well, I mean, just like we were discussing some of these other things, should it be in the regs or in the bylaw?
Yeah.
That's why I'm just raising the question, that's all.
This does seem like a legitimate definition at this
It's
point.
distinctly different than a lot of others, so.
I mean, we could reduce, I mean, it's always kind of a good idea to say including but not limited to.
Well, it does say, hey, Mark, it does say no new structure, and we are saying it's supposed to be a buffer area, which would be a path or whatever, so would be,
Yeah,
should
but
be
on
no
one hand,
new
we're saying a structure is a fence.
I know,
Right?
I know.
So there needs to be
I
some
agree.
delineation.
What if we just kept including but not limited to, and then remove fences from it? So it'd give us the discretion on fences anyway. If someone wants to put in a
Where is fences in there?
fence that we didn't like,
I don't see fence.
Fences aren't there.
that's not there?
No.
Okay, then we don't have to talk about them. Oh,
But formal
I think I
walkways would be acceptable, I would think.
I think
Formal, yeah, could be.
Yeah, why a
Maybe we
formal
take
walkway-
Well, just say
how do you-
walkways.
Why
how do you
don't I just
define
take
formal and
walkways out?
informal?
And we
Oh,
can
I'm sorry.
decide on a
I mean,
case-by-case
take out
basis.
formal walkways.
That's
Would
a
be
good idea.
excluded.
Yeah, take it out.
Take it out and we'll decide on a case-by-case basis.
If we really
with-
didn't like one, we could exclude it.
Yeah, so let's take out walkway, just formal walkways altogether.
Yeah.
Well, and it does say at the
Okay.
very beginning, at our discretion, we can allow a variance.
So retaining walls, should we say something along structural retaining walls, or?
Well, not
Yeah,
necess-
Or,
not necessarily. I mean, retaining walls, that's a big issue. There's a multitude of reasons.
aesthetic, I mean, maybe we wouldn't necessarily permit, maybe we would,
Maybe
one
we should
that's
take
done
out
for
retaining
landscape
walls.
aesthetic purposes rather than functional purposes. Functional purposes, you may need one.
Why don't we
Right,
take
that's
it
my
out
point.
completely?
Exactly, right.
Take it out and leave that.
Yeah, it's not limited to. I mean, we do qualify it that including but not limited to.
You want me to
so
take out
you
retaining
can-
walls?
You can take out retaining walls and you'd still,
I think there's certain situations where we would not approve one, but
Right.
I'm okay with taking it out of there.
Okay.
Yeah,
I get
there's,
you.
there's a place where, yeah, you probably wouldn't want it, but there's other places where they are necessary.
It kind of makes sense, actually, when you take those out and look at the other ones.
Yeah.
They're very different.
impenetrable structures.
Or pool. Which I can fall in, just like I fell out of this chair. Sorry. Okay. So I'll strike retaining walls and formal walkways, and then I'll strike the last sentence, okay?
Right, the last sentence. Yep, that sounds
And
good.
we want to keep in staircases that don't meet the conservation's regulations for
Mhm.
staircases over.
I think so.
Which last sentence are you striking?
The variance sentence, because it's redundant.
It's not in a definition.
Yeah.
I got a stumbling block here with this whole thing. I can think of a case here where there was a Cinderella deck proposed on the back of the house that went 5 feet into this 10-foot zone, not too long ago in hearing, and the project was denied, and that was the primary reason for it. And that's an application where you've got a 5-foot deck cantilevered 8 feet in the air above anything with no supports underneath. That's no hindrance on being able to maintain that building. You know, that's,
And it goes back to what I was saying before, it doesn't impede transit of that area either.
I think that was, at our discretion to go either way on that.
You could grant a variance from any of it.
Covered in 310-4D,
Right.
and it's not, it's extraneous to the definition.
These are just definitions. It does not limit our ability to grant a variance.
that's true, but the definition's got to be clear enough to,
Well, and to future commissioners to understand what the intention was.
Right.
The intention is to provide room to get around your home.
it shouldn't be the threshold to go one step further.
Yeah, because if we eliminated, like thinking about a deck, the 8-foot-high deck is one thing, the 2-foot-high deck is another thing.
How about
There's a
on-grade
place where
decks?
that's got merit.
How about instead of just decks, you say on-grade deck?
A cantilever deck could be an issue too if there's,
And
trees or
patios are
something,
ground
so
level, and you
It
can
kind of
walk.
has to be taken case by case.
But if
I
you've
just
got
kinda
your
wanna
patio.
It does, but it shouldn't be the catalyst to disallow it.
Patio doesn't exactly impede walkway, but if you've got your patio up to the 50,
There's a
then
strong
people
tendency.
will walk
to go
outside
To go
the
over it.
patio.
To maintain that, so that was
Yeah.
that was the point, it's just that from experience, and you see it everywhere, like if there's a structure, no matter what it is, excluding a fence, because a fence is a barrier, but any other structure, there's just a strong tendency to go a little bit around it,
Yeah,
just in our normal existence,
right.
so.
Well, and again, because there were a couple of issues that we were approving projects where the corner of the building was right on the 50. And yet, there was gonna be a need to go around.
Maybe
Right.
what we can do is, this is a definition in a bylaw. Maybe we can have a section, there is a section in the regs, it's gonna, be 50-foot no disturb, 60, we can make one for the 60-foot no new structure if we don't already have it. And there you kind of describe your thinking for this. You say it is for this purpose. That belongs in the regs, not in the definitions.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Works.
Okay? Anything else on page 5?
So yeah, we already talked about the floodplain thing, so
Yep.
that's. So in the sizes,
You're on page 6 at 310-3.
yeah.
Yep.
So when you read that, freshwater, wetland resources areas, marshes, wet meadows, bogs, swamps, vernal pools, vernal pool habitat, land subject to flooding, bordering and isolated lands, both bordering and isolated.
Yep.
Wait, that actually doesn't necessarily make sense.
Yeah, I was looking at that too, hold on. Land subject, both bordering and isolated. Land subject to flooding, both bordering and isolated. Isolated wetlands, well, isolated wetlands are not the same thing as isolated land, as land subject to flooding, but actually, there really is no
Is that possible?
isolated land
I've
subject
never
to
heard
flooding.
of that. Yeah.
I have to check, that's been in there for a long
I mean,
time.
I kind of thought that was referring to all those other items, but anyway.
Check on
But
that.
so the way that you read this, Amy, are all those things in that list protected, and then it's talking about isolated
Yes,
wetlands?
isolated wetlands are distinctively different.
So like a vernal pool of
Well,
200 square feet is already protected
if
regardless
it is,
of that.
only if it's certified.
Oh, here we go.
Otherwise, it's an isolated.
Otherwise, it's an
wetland.
isolated wetland. And I did a little bit more research on
mean,
sizing and stuff.
I've read that the commission, if they think it's a vernal pool, though, they can have basically vetted in the
Right.
application, in
That's
the notice
what
of
I would
intent,
recommend, is that it
Something.
has to be studied.
is clearly a vernal
Right.
pool, then you could.
Chatham actually has very good regulations in terms of, and they back it up, is that basically they're saying all isolated wetlands, they have not been shown a case where an isolated vegetated wetland is not a vernal pool.
Yeah, I wouldn't really see one in the Lower Cape.
Yeah. So, they're on one extreme. But I agree with them. I don't know of a case where I've seen an isolated wetland, vegetated wetland that meets the definition. That's not what I think is a vernal, what looks, appears to be a vernal pool.
Doesn't a vernal pool disappear in the winter?
Disappears in the late summer, early fall. It's seasonal.
It doesn't have to.
It doesn't always have to. It just
Yeah.
really can't
Doesn't
support,
have to.
it doesn't support
Any
basically carnivorous
fish,
fish,
yeah.
things like that.
Okay, I thought it was whether.
It's
appeared-
seasonal, but
There's a lot of certified vernal pools that, never dry up or haven't for decades.
Okay.
the one that you saw today on Head of the Bay, it's not certified, but I would bet my money on it that it's a vernal pool. To that effect, we've looked at other towns, and 2,500 is a common one. 2,000, but also we have extremes. We have, where did I put it? So some towns so Nikki made a bunch of phone calls and asked other towns, and some towns said, well, a wetland's a wetland, doesn't matter what size it is.
Yeah.
However, something I need to ask somebody, maybe council or something, is because the state defines a wetland as anything above 5,000 square feet, if we don't, some other towns, like especially on the Outer Cape, Provincetown, Truro, and Wellfleet, they don't have a size requirement. They just stay silent on it, and they say a wetland is a wetland. But if you don't say, if you're not clearer about that, an applicant could say, well, you're no more stringent than the Wetlands Protection Act, because you're not quantifying it. Because that's kind of in my mind, if you're silent on, if you say a wetland is a wetland, and you're using the definition of a wetland from the Wetlands Protection Act,
You're saying by default it's 5,000?
I'm saying that's an argument that would be easily made by an applicant. So, That being said, we're currently at 3,000. Other ones we came up with, there are a couple at 2,500. Yarmouth is at 3,000. Dennis and Barnstable go to 500 square feet. Orleans, I don't recommend it because it's too hard, is 650 square feet with a depth of 2 inches. Not that one. Regardless of how much, if you are looking to reduce it, you can stay at 3,000 if you want. Please don't go the opposite way. I don't think this board ever would. But I think regardless of however much you reduce it, even if you go down to 500, I don't think we're going to be seeing a drastically higher number of cases than what we're seeing now. We already pick up most of it.
The consultants already bring forward any wetland regardless.
Regardless of size, they'll call it out on a
they
plan.
already
Oh, we
do.
have an 1,800 square foot wetland here.
Yeah, to me, there's a lot of very important small wetlands in
Mhm.
town, and they're, like you say, they're all vernal pools.
Mm-hmm.
Probably by definition, they just haven't been, quantified through they
Process,
basically
yeah.
just need to have peepers, salamanders, and one
Fairy
other
shrimp.
thing. Yeah, it's like, and they all have them, so.
Now, we looked at a house on Walters a couple years ago,
Walder Road, yep.
and there was a pond.
Mhm.
It was a pond.
Yeah.
Wasn't a vernal pool,
Yes,
but
right.
it was a pond.
It was man-made.
Mhm.
It was a man-made isolated wetland.
Okay, but it was a pond that was below our,
3,000, right.
Yeah, it was
Size,
about
sure.
2,500. Mm-hmm.
so would that be included in this area or some
It,
other
it, it would
area?
be considered an isolated vegetated wetland.
Okay.
Yes, so yes.
I would be in favor of reducing it. That's been a concern of mine. I mean, there's so many of these vernal pools around, and they're not necessarily. I was asking, well, they're not necessarily given the protection because they're not certified, and like
Right.
Amy was saying, they actually have that protection if they were certified, or the board could say, hey, look, that's a vernal pool, we have to go through a spring season, which is the only time you can actually certify them.
Yeah, and that's what
To,
Chatham has really good guidelines for that.
But, yeah, they're really no less important when they get smaller. I mean,
I guess my question would be the difference between 2,500 square feet, 3,000 square feet, and 5,000 square feet. How is that going to impact the volume that comes before us?
that's what Amy was saying. She didn't think there'd be a.
But you're saying there could be a lot.
There's some vernal
Well,
pool.
I think we're already getting them, basically, but,
Yeah. They're basically right now coming to you,
another,
showing you that it's lower and asking you to verify with an RDA. You're seeing them as RDAs, you've seen a few. Seeing them as RDAs where they say, we evaluated this wetland, here are the wetland data sheets, it's 2,000 square feet, can you please confirm the wetland delineation? Thus, if you confirm the wetland delineation is 2,000 square feet, they don't have to file with conservation. So,
So
you're already seeing them.
We have.
in that case, can't you require them to determine whether it's a vernal pool or not? Or who,
You
who's
can't make them
responsible?
certify it. Whether we can make them,
I've heard that you can, through MAC or something, that if you feel that it is, then you can say that, we've got to go through this, but,
investigate.
and then, in your opinion, Amy, and my opinion, and Chatham's opinion, nearly all of them would be found to be anyway. It's very likely. So to me, I'd rather see to just get it done in this stage here and go with 500 or 1,000 or,
Yep.
when you have a legitimate wetland vernal pool, then protect it as we
Yeah.
should be.
My only recommend, I am, maybe we're making more work for ourselves. I don't think we're gonna be making that much more work for, I really don't think we're gonna be making that much more work for ourselves. And we could be wrong, but,
I think the only place it might come up is in the, possible subdivisions of some of the very last large tracts of land in Harwich, and some of the reasons why they haven't been subdivided yet is because they're just full of these vernal pools.
yeah, right,
And they really shouldn't be,
no.
and as of now, they could possibly, if they had
Could.
good lawyers and whatnot, just bulldoze the whole thing,
Kill 'em.
and that's where I'd like to see the
Yeah.
regulation protected, but.
I mean, right now, so, a 500,000 square foot vernal pool could be more significant to more interests of the act and the bylaw than, say, a section of coastal bank that we have, There could be more environmental, to protecting a smaller wetland than it is to protecting a coastal bank or something like that.
Yeah, vernal pools have been
They're really high.
they're very
Value.
high value habitat.
So, I'm in favor of 500. Right? You find that hard to believe, but
You said that very
I'm
quietly.
in favor of 500. Trying it out.
I would support that.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
And you said there's several other towns that are doing it?
Yes. I just I wouldn't go the route that some other towns have done and be silent and just say, basically, a wetland is a wetland, no matter what size it is. We don't want to regulate puddles.
Right.
And we also don't want to, I'd rather have some number on it. That way
Oh,
they
yeah,
can't say it
definitely.
defaults to the state. I think it's too risky
No, I'm
to
going
not put a
back
number.
to consistency with other towns, maybe, or
It's
standardization.
actually, from what I found, I mean, there's a couple, 3,000, 25, there's few, and then it's 500, and then there's silent. And then the Orleans, which is an outlier, weird.
What were the two that were 500?
There's more than two, but the two that I have, are Dennis and Barnstable. I think the wetlands that you're gonna get that are 500 square feet, they're gonna be those vernal pools, which I think we should protect. Those smaller ones.
I would take your opinion into consideration.
So, isn't the objective to vote on all these changes tonight?
Yep.
We have to vote, so we have to more than consider them. We have to agree
Yes.
about them. Or disagree and then deal with it.
Yeah, you don't have to take my recommendation, but you
Well,
gotta
you're the
come
one
up
that-
with, you have to come up with a consensus on the number, on what number you want there.
Well, you're the one that's gonna have to administer it, or work.
But you know what, I'd rather do that than see a vernal pool get filled. Because we didn't have a size small enough.
I understand your point about protecting the vernal pools, but I can't support going under 3,000 square feet. I think in cases it's going to make a big difference to people. And I think there's an opportunity to be consistent by leaving it where it is. I mean, truth be told, I'd really like to see it go to 5,000, but for more other reasons, more for the ability to do, certain people to do certain things along the parameters of agriculture, but that's probably not nearly as prevalent in our particular circumstance. So, I mean, for the sake of argument and definition, to me, 3,000 is adequate.
You want to try and take some sort of vote on this particular stage so we could get past it and.
Isn't agriculture exempt and put in a different
Only if
category?
you can't just start up from scratch, you can't just start
Yeah.
doing it and call it agriculture, you have to meet certain criteria to do
Yes,
that. Yeah.
yes.
And of course, we don't know the rationale from when we lowered it to 3,000 from 5,000, whoever that
I
was.
mean, it does say, actually, the language in the town warrant was to better protect our smaller wetlands.
Okay.
Which is justifiable.
I understand what you're saying too, I mean, in terms of creating a more difficult opportunity for people, but I have to look at what we're tasked to do, and if it was different, if it was a different wetland type, then, I don't know, I might be a little bit more lenient, but I do think that the majority of these tiny isolated wetlands are vernal pools. So,
Can you include language in there to,
you can still grant variances, keep that in mind too.
problem with variance is every time you go to a variance, it's one more argument, one more discussion, one more series of continuances.
Yeah, you know, when someone goes to, you know, bulldoze backfill a vernal pool, I mean, I think there needs to be a serious discussion on a variance should be given. It shouldn't just be automatic. You know, but there's some of the most important wildlife habitats we have here, and important to groundwater quality and everything else. It's, you know, everything just seeps right in there. They recharge the aquifer. Really important. So to me, that is something that should be a variance discussion. And sure, the variances could be necessary in certain situations where, you know, the public good or whatever makes sense. But it should be a pretty serious discussion. And right now, we're just leaving it. They have the right essentially to fill in these vernal pools. So
Yep.
I think we should maybe take some sort of vote on it here to get passed, or just go around the table or something.
So how are we dealing with this? I mean, we could vote specifically on this language, and then if everything else is basically done by consensus, we can vote on the rest of it afterwards? Does that work?
So the way it's gonna go to town meeting is, it's gonna be by request of the Conservation Commission. And just like you see from Selectmen or FinCom, it's gonna say what your vote is.
So it
You're
has to
really
be-
voting on it as a whole.
Yeah, we need to vote on it as a whole, I assume, but
And
Wanna
we'd
get
like to
past this
see
part. Yeah.
no dissent.
It never, yeah, right. But,
Well, so then, like a straw poll is
that's
what
fine,
you're
we're under
asking.
discussion.
Well,
We
yeah,
can
but,
straw poll ourselves, we don't let other people do that of us, but.
the
Mart,
problem with
just
that is we're gonna vote on the entire thing, but
we've all basically agreed on everything
Do you
so far.
object
So.
to
But probably not on this issue.
Right.
how
Yeah, but if
much that
it's-
you would
if
object to
it's-
town meeting?
If we get a consensus on it, we gotta move forward, and then if somebody wants to
Vote
vote
against
against
it.
it at the very end,
Right,
then
and then,
that's
well,
the-
going back to your comment, you'd like to get a full,
Yeah, but if we can't, we can't.
okay,
I mean,
all right.
we want as close to consensus as
Well, we need to
can,
do,
But we gotta find out how far we
Right.
are
right,
to start.
And if we
with,
wanna
right?
get this
right.
into, anything into town
Yeah, we
meeting,
gotta wrap it up here.
I mean, you can, so I don't know if we'll have a special, town meeting in the fall or not. I mean, if,
Right, let's try to get it done tonight.
we can wait and discuss that part further. We can leave this part out if you want. I don't really wanna leave this part out.
I'd say let's go around the table
All right.
on 500 feet. and-
Yeah, I mean, if we were the Conservation Commission of, say, Taunton, Mass, then I'd probably say leave it at 5,000. Given our environment and everything else and where we are and the issues that we've always dealing with as far as groundwater and all, and the resource areas, I'm comfortable with going to 500.
Yeah, I'm good with 500.
I'm good with 500.
I'm comfortable, I wasn't expecting to go that low, but I can do that one.
No.
I'm comfortable with 500, but I would probably prefer about 1,000.
Okay.
Okay.
So what do? Let's move on for now. We gotta,
Yeah, let's,
I don't know, I don't know where to go from here. I mean,
Yeah, we move, and any of us can choose to vote not to approve this at the
But
end.
at the end, you'd be,
I guess the consensus would be that it's 500 for the moment.
so that's, I mean, that's what we'd be changing right now in here.
I would be agreeable to leave it as it is.
I would vote against that.
Well, wait a minute, this, the 2,500, let me ask you one last question. The 2,500, was that Brad's recommendation?
no, it was what I put in because that was my initial finding. The first couple towns that I looked at were that, and then I looked at more, so, and then there's anything between saying nothing, but they think that it means,
No, no, I don't want to say nothing.
right,
That's-
right, no, but I mean, there seems to be the majority of the towns around here either say between 2,500 and 3,000 or 500. So if you're looking for consistency with other towns, there are, I would probably say, roughly as many who are 2,500 to 3,000 range as there are the 500.
Is our 500?
With no in between that, other than Orleans, which was the 650 and 2 inches.
Be interesting to know when the towns that went to 500 did that. If it's a recent change or recent trend, or if it's something that's...
I did print them out, I don't know the year, but it says the years on them. I think Barnstable's been that way for quite a while.
Absolutely, I just think that it should, this is just saying that they're regulatable. It's not saying,
You can't do anything.
Can't
yeah,
do it.
we can, you know, we can say, all right, they're trying to do this, and it's just it's a little more than a puddle. Let's let them deal
Right,
with
it may not have certain
mitigate a little bit
characteristics.
or whatever.
It may be an in lieu fee, it may be one of,
500 isn't really a puddle, it's 10 by 50.
Right,
But it may
you know,
not
if
have-
that's our opinion when we look at it, we can say, well, you know,
And, yeah, but it still comes back to the bantering of opinion, because
it does, yeah. But what it prevents happening is, you know, a really nice, high-value 1,000 square foot or 900 square foot vernal pool.
right now, up to
Right now, someone
3,000.
has the right to bulldoze it over, and now it becomes a discussion, and we can say, hey, this
That
is-
same argument's gonna come up regardless of the size, though, depending on what they wanna do with that property. Whether it's 2,500, they'll argue that that's...
Yeah, they're welcome to. I would probably not be in favor of either of those scenarios.
So technically, you just saw one on the north side of Oak Street where it was by definition a wetland
Yep.
because they had brought in fill.
Yep.
And it was technically right around regulatable size.
Yeah.
And we actually said it wasn't a wetland
Yeah.
because of its, even though it met the definition of a wetland, we were allowing them to disturb. You know?
Right, yeah, I had no problem with that. It made sense. You could tell it wasn't, you know, it was just like
yeah,
some
because the material
phragmites
that's
and-
been brought in.
Yeah, so we always have the ability to do what's reasonable, which I try and do, but, right now, you can go into a pristine forest, you know, in East Harwich where there's a lot of vernal pools, and, that's the right of that developer to bulldoze it over, even a pretty substantial one, so. And vernal pools, what's stated in the state law and in here, that it's not just the pool that's important, it's the habitat around it, the 100
use
feet
that.
around it.
Yeah.
So, you know, you might have a pool, it's only like 20 by 20, this is like the size of this, but the habitat around it is 250 by 250, and that's what's important. So to say, yeah, you're just gonna fill in this little vernal pool, but you're destroying, you know, an acre or so of very high-value habitat, and that's why to me, it's important to protect those pools.
Yeah, but bordering wetlands, wouldn't that 250 around it be a bordering vegetation?
No,
No,
it's upland.
not a wetland, it's buffer zone.
It's a special type of habitat, but typically it is dry upland.
Yeah.
And it really is only protected unless we protect it in our the state doesn't protect it.
Right.
Unless it's in riverfront area, and then they protect it, oddly enough. But to me, it actually is a really important thing to protect here.
Well, so at this point, we're leaving it, I guess, at the 500. I mean, that's what the consensus
Yeah,
was right
yeah,
now. I
we're-
mean, otherwise, we're gonna keep discussing it.
Right,
Yeah.
and
We
we
gotta
can, at
move
the end,
forward.
we can go out, we can do more. Go ahead.
Ponds
On
at 500 too? What is a
Page
pond
7.
Any wetland, 500 is, I mean,
And then, do we need to say ponds? Or
nope,
we can just eliminate that?
nope, because, well, freshwater wetlands, it's considered,
A pond is a
yeah. Marshes, wet meadows, bogs, swamps, vernal pools, and vernal pool habitat. Yeah, should be pond in there. Pond should be in there.
No, it's next.
Oh.
And then it goes banks, reservoirs, lakes,
Yeah,
ponds.
right, I agree.
Wait, what?
The rest would be how it reads. There's no change to how the rest would read. Just
On-
change the square footage.
For on both items? Right. And then you're and crossing out, I recommend or possibly less.
I penciled in 500 for now.
Right, but the wording, the words in red,
Yeah,
you're
not
crossing.
possibly
Right,
less.
right,
No,
right.
no. I put that in because
Right,
Brad had
right,
said
right.
possibly less, and I wanted to
I'm just
remember that.
clarifying it, that's all.
Yep. See, on the next,
Rivers are under freshwater wetland resource areas? Rivers are?
Mhm.
Even the area that's saltwater?
I put a discussion topic in here. So Jim had mentioned earlier that we're not gonna have a 100-foot buffer or we're not gonna have a buffer zone to a floodplain. Everybody go with that?
I'm fine with
Yeah,
that.
I would agree with that.
All right, so I'll just do that, no buffer to floodplain, just clarify that there.
Under conservation variance provision.
Where,
Wait a
sorry?
minute, so we're striking out that whole paragraph in red?
Well, we'll say lands within 100 feet of the aforesaid resource areas with the exception of land subject to coastal storm flowage. No, sorry. Freshwater.
Why is it accepting?
So the first, except as permitted by the, when you look back at the page before, that's where it goes back to. So, no person shall commence to remove, fill, dredge, build upon, degrade, discharge into any of these wetland resource areas, including, and it talks about buffer zones and everything in the others. So I would say, oh, and then it says lands within, so C says lands within 100 feet of any of the aforesaid resource areas with, and then I'll say with the exception of land subject to coastal storm flowage.
But we've already got, except for the riverfront area.
But that's
vernal
coming out.
pool habitat.
That actually is correct, because the riverfront area is a
It's its own
resource,
thing,
and vernal pool habitat is a resource.
yeah.
And they don't need a buffer zone necessarily.
Well, the vernal pool habitat is the 100-foot
It's a
buffer.
100-foot buffer around a vernal pool, so it
Yeah.
wouldn't be appropriate to have another buffer
On
around
top of
that.
that.
Well, we're not, we haven't
Where is
mentioned
that
vernal
defined?
pool habit. Oh,
State.
yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Vernal pools and
Oh,
vernal.
no, sorry, not the state,
Vernal pool habitat is a resource
Right.
in itself, so
Yeah.
Right.
Where is that defined, though?
it's in the state law
it's
and
under-
it's in here.
It's under fresh, the section we just
Yes.
changed, the prior, under A.
it's a resource in and of itself.
Yeah, and I would agree that it doesn't necessarily
We
need
need
a
another
buffer zone.
100 on top.
So,
Yep.
that's-
So you're just adding floodplain to that section.
I would say with the exception of land subject to coastal storm flowage, yeah. Fine? And you were doing conservation variance provision at the
Yeah,
bottom of
to
the
me,
page?
there's a very important but small thing where it says, To me, it should say where maximum feasible compliance is achieved and by,
And,
rather than or.
okay?
Catch, yeah. That makes sense.
So, instead of just saying the Conservation Commission may, or grant a conservation variance from the requirements of 50-foot no disturb zone, I think it should just say from this bylaw.
Right, yeah, it probably.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. Everybody all right with that, those changes to that? Nothing else on the rest of the page?
I'm good.
How about the next one, page 9? The only thing I have different is, not on this page, but Dan Croto has a point about the fee section, we'll talk about shortly. Good with page 9?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The only thing I changed on page 10 is I realized that we forgot to put a word in the last time we did this. Provide. Good to go on to page 11? I have a
May I, just for the record, can I bring up that issue of the 5 items per meeting?
Sure.
I was mentioning this to Mark today, too. Looking at the regs for Sandwich, they have a, well, it's not in their bylaws, it's specifically in their regulations.
Yes, I checked that, yeah.
Yeah, that allows them to accept only 5 new hearings for any given meeting. Now, it's conditioned also on the fact that they have bi-monthly meetings, which I think that's a typo. I think it should be semi-monthly meetings, but they say it's bi-monthly meetings.
They meet
so
the same, actually, same nights we do.
They what?
They meet the same nights
Yeah,
we
so
do.
it should be semi-monthly probably. But nonetheless, so if you were the 6th person requesting an, NOI, for example, at a
A
meeting.
new one, not a continuation.
Yeah, then we have the right to request that you sign a waiver of your 21-day hearing right and come to the following meeting. You'd be first on the list for inclusion in the following meeting is the way I interpret it. I don't know, as I read that, I thought it had some merit, given the history that we have with new hearings coming up and the time that we have to put into these as well. It would help sort of smooth out the number of items that we need to consider on at each meeting that we hold. So I bring that up, not that we can necessarily have to put it in there tonight, but just as something to consider.
Yeah, and we'd have to investigate it further. We actually have a waiver, we used to have a waiver to the extent that saying that if we don't, you waive the requirement to hear you within 21 days. But I don't know how that would hold up in court.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I can see a lot of some people trying to take advantage of it. If we don't hear a project within 21 days, almost by default, they are approved. They could be. Like if they appealed the court, if they could. So I'd want to just check on that. I do think there's we looked, there's a couple cases this year where we had more than 5 new ones, and that was around the holidays. We had 8 new ones and like 5 continuances one time. So I hear what you're saying, that it would give us, you know, it'd be more constant, potentially give us more time on a few things. But I just don't know.
Take some of the weight
we'd
off
have to
of
look into it.
our administrator as well.
Yeah.
But we can, we may want to
It might
call
could-
Sandwich and see what their
How they,
experience has been with that, too.
I could ask council what their thought about the legality of something like
Yeah.
that would be if you're interested in something like
Well,
that.
wouldn't that negate a meeting periodically more often to cover the workload?
I'm sorry, I don't follow you.
Maybe I don't understand.
It could, I suppose, yeah.
But I mean, if you're gonna get backed up and all you're gonna do is push people off,
Potentially.
so I mean, it's gonna necessitate having a meeting every week if the workload permits. And
We
I
could
mean, it's not that
also
that's a
do it
bad
by a
thing, but-
case-by-case basis, whereas our hearings tonight, we had several new cases, but they were pretty easy.
Right.
You know, you can beat by judgment what it
Yeah.
looks like. If we have 6 dock
yeah,
applications,
No,
that's
it's
different.
I mean, I just wanted to bring it up because we're going
Yeah.
over that section,
Yep.
so it's just a,
I hear you.
to think about.
That,
it.
yeah, that would be a place in the reg,
Yeah.
for an exemption. So, this next section about fees is what, basically this is what other towns, similar to what other towns have, so this is all new. These items here. So, Dan Croto's response is, the fee section is concerning if it is used too broadly. Dennis had an automatic $400 consultant fee for a while for any notice of intent filed, and it went into a friend of the agent every time.
But we're not,
We're not doing that, yeah.
I mean, we've done one, I think, one time, where we
Right.
wanted somebody to check the delineation.
I think he's just saying recommend a written reasoning for the fees required to be issued to the applicant, and to why a particular NOI would would require additional oversight.
Yeah, I think the way we've used it, which has only been the one time, seemed very
I mean, I think you're covering
We
it.
don't
in-
use it, some towns use it for every NOI. They have a consultant do the review. I'm like, that's my job. But on the other hand,
Could
Dave's-
I think you're
could be
covering,
something we could use more often.
but we could be using more often, because sometimes we get very taxed.
Yeah,
here, so.
workload and everything.
Um,
I don't have any problem with any of it.
I,
I have just two minor things. At
Okay.
the end of sentence 2, born, with the E on the end.
and item J,
No, yeah, and second sentence, right at the end, expenses borne by the commission.
I think you could do it either way, with or without it.
I don't know, I'm just questioning it.
I think that's how it was written for some reason. Anyway,
I just pointing out, because I don't know.
with an E, born. Normally it wouldn't, but yeah.
And then at the end, you talk about a schedule of established by local regulation of fees. What is that?
We have a fee schedule, so we have a fee schedule sheet that says how much each application kind of costs.
But this is consultant fees.
So this would,
No, I know you have a schedule of like permits and all of that stuff, but this is for the maximum consultant fee charge to reimburse. It's saying it's based by a schedule.
oh, sorry.
That's what I was questioning.
It was, we'd have to determine what that is. We could take that out, or if you want, I could use whatever was most common amongst other towns.
I'd say take it out.
Yeah, because wouldn't it be based on what the consultant would
Yes.
charge?
I take it out.
Where is that exactly?
And
And,
All right, we'll just take N out. Make it easier. Okay,
So just a formatting thing, aren't the,
I'm gonna reformat all this.
but specifically the points under J are subpoints, or subparagraphs, so they should be numbered, right? They're, am I It's like if you go back to,
Oh,
you go back to 310.8D, points under D are numbered. Isn't that the way this should go? Am I missing something?
No, I see what you mean, but,
Whatever, it's a minor issue, it doesn't have to do with content, it's just,
Commissioner's author, so upon receipt of a permit application or request for determination, 1, the commission is authorized to require an applicant to pay the fee, whatever your purview is. I can number them. I can see how it looks numbered and make the decision.
right, there you go.
Sound good?
Yep.
Okay.
I don't have anything else on the rest of it.
I had one other comment that I didn't give to you, and that is after-the-fact filings. Currently, what's our fee schedule for after-the-fact filing?
Double.
Double? I noticed one town charges a flat $1,000, which seems like a pretty strong deterrent.
It is. Now would have to go to wetlands, in the wetlands account too, and not the general fund, because right now, we have a notice of intent fee is divided, the state fee is divided between town and state. And then we have our separate local fee, bylaw fee of $135. So we'd have to make sure it was a bylaw fee, and that way that portion would not go to the general fund,
Hey, Amy, this whole,
or it could if you wanted it to.
And we would have the ability to adjust that in certain circumstances? If we,
You could waive
if we
it.
adopted the 1,000.
Was that in a bylaw? I can't remember, or was it a reg?
I'm going to say reg.
Okay.
I can think of certain circumstances that have come before us that you'd like to give them the maximum. And I can think of other circumstances that I'd prefer to give them the minimum.
Yeah. So right now, it would be due at the time of application, which would be before you even see it, to make that determination. We could always hold the check, we could always not deposit
Can-
something, but.
can we go back to this whole thing? Jay?
Jay,
Yeah,
okay?
because as I'm reading it, it says upon receipt, you know, because going back to what you were saying, John, there's like it's like sub-things. Jay is saying upon receipt of a permit application. When would we request a consultant fee upon permit, upon the request? K and L I can understand, because K is saying if during the meetings and discussion of the topic, we're asking for additional
Yeah,
information from a consultant, and L is basically saying the same thing, if there's an additional thing where we need to have more information from a consultant to make a good decision.
Like a shellfish survey?
Or like we did on delineation. But when the town, when the applicant submits it, I mean, he's got an engineer or a consultant that's done work for him already.
Well, it's just saying we're authorized to, it doesn't say we have to.
But when would you?
I mean, it's possible, but Amy.
I mean, I can see it for K and L,
come before me, that-
Amy's like, all right, we need another delineation here.
but that's not before.
Yeah, that's upon receipt, I don't know. I mean, if all the other, you got this
That's
from.
the
Again,
same.
Why
but
don't
this
you
is a
just
bylaw, I mean,
take
I
that
wanna make
first?
sure we're
So-
submitting something that makes sense to the, I mean, the town's gotta vote on this.
you
Upon
can
receipt.
say, take upon receipt a permit application or request for determination out. And just leave the rest. That way we don't have to worry about timing of it.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Take that first half of the sentence out up to the comma, and just say the
Right.
commission is authorized to require an applicant to pay a fee.
That would be better, yeah. Makes a little more
Can
Yeah.
can you combine L with J?
Eh,
What's the,
See, because K and L make more sense to me. I'm not sure what J is doing.
So K and L are asking you to pay the fee. This is, well, I guess there's two.
Commission is authorized to assess a fee for the reasonable costs and expenses incurred by the commission for a specific. So,
borne by the commission?
so J is about determining that costs are required, K and L are about,
But J is
Requiring
upon
their
receipt
payment?
of the permit.
what's she saying, take that
We'll
out.
strike
I was
that.
gonna strike
Yeah, I
that.
think then it makes pretty good sense at that point. It's a little wordy, but
Yeah, it is a little weird.
makes pretty good sense. I mean, maybe Amy could clean it up a little bit.
Well, I guess that's, yeah, but the rest of J is basically what we're saying in K and L too. We're saying, I mean, we need more information. It says, commission may require payment at any time during the deliberation prior to a final decision. I'm not sure, but
I think K and L are clarifying and providing details for what J is setting out, which is why I was suggesting they were subordinate points.
I kind
Right,
of agree.
Well, yeah, it seems like it would make pretty good sense to strike that sentence to the comma, and then maybe number the points underneath, as John was saying. I mean, the substance of it all seems fine. It's just, there's a bit of wordiness to it, and it's kind of late at night, and we're having a little trouble.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna,
I don't see anything substantive that
if it's
needs
a
to
little
change.
redundant,
Maybe
it's okay.
take a,
okay.
I'll
if you
look
took a
at it.
fresh look at it with that in mind,
Yeah.
and if something can be taken out,
Right,
maybe,
yeah, I'll do that.
Well, we took out N, definitely.
N's gone.
Great job. Not easy.
And then you're just taking out that first sentence of J.
It's the first clause.
Comma, yeah, and then starting a sentence after the comma. Basically starting the whole thing after the comma.
Okay.
Okay,
So getting back to that $1,000,
yes.
under G on page 12, how about if we added to the end of that first sentence where you say, or have the offending party file an after-the-fact notice of intent for the work, along with an after-the-fact filing fee of up to $1,000. That gives us the discretion to charge up to that, or just charge double.
This is all gonna get vetted by council too, so
Yeah.
if that's not appropriate,
would-
she'll let us know.
Yeah, I would agree with up to.
Of
but
up to.
Specify $1,000, that's borderline extortion.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
What
I'm
are
cool with
the
it.
filing fees typically?
I don't,
Double.
It
After
depends
the
on
I
the
don't, I don't like the,
category.
I don't like the idea of
Six
any
categories.
kind of fee or number in a bylaw.
Well, we have $300 in here.
That's state too, though.
That's what?
That's state.
Wait, where are we anyways?
Under E, it says $300. I mean, if you prefer to put that into a reg or something like that,
I
Amy,
can
that's,
ask if,
that's
it'll get vetted by council. If they think it's more appropriate as a reg, we'll put it there. I just made a note of it. We'll see how it looks in there.
Because, I mean, once it's in the bylaw, how long has it been $300? Maybe it should be higher,
It's a
or,
state law, we change it.
You can't change the
Okay.
300, yeah. But I think it does. I like the idea of, I mean, we have double the filing fee now for after the fact. But if people did know it potentially could be a lot more, they might think twice. So that your question about the fees, right now, regardless of what type of notice of intent, our local fee is $135. But then, so if you're working on a single-family house, it's category 1 state fee, which is $110, broken up, not quite in half, but state down. Category 2 is a level higher, then category 3 is like subdivision. Category 4, 5, 6, like docks, revetments, dredging, things like that, and it's determined more by square footage or square footage of alteration than it is, and it can get, gets pretty high. It gets into the thousands.
Yeah.
When you get into the upper categories. But basically, for the site work with a single-family home, it's a category 1.
That's where we see a lot of the violations, I think, too, right?
Yeah.
Well, so are we done with the discussion part of this?
Ask everybody.
Any
more
further
comments?
questions,
I'm
comments?
ready to vote.
No.
I think that's what we gotta do. No more comments? Okay, I make a motion to approve the revised, or make a motion to approve the changes to the bylaw provisions to be presented at town meeting for the wetlands wetland protection bylaws. Does that make sense, Amy?
Mm-hmm.
Second.
Did we come to a final decision on the number?
No, well, what we're voting on is what we put in was the 500.
Put in the
That's what we said, we have to put a number in there, and then unfortunately, now you have to vote on the whole set of revision, including that.
Got it.
Correct, Amy?
Correct.
So, that was the motion,
Second.
seconded by Jim. All those in favor? Aye. Abstain?
Opposed.
Okay.
There's an abstention?
No, it's opposed.
One opposed.
Oh, did I say abstain?
You said
I meant-
abstain, yes.
No, you were asking if there were abstentions. Okay.
All right.
I know it's getting late, a couple quick things. We have put up a camera in the location that I sent you, went up today. See what happens in a couple days' time. Pretty egregious. 30 trees were essentially butchered. They were hacked. So, we'll see what happens. Police are aware of it, other people are aware of it. If anybody wants to
Yeah, I'll try and take a look at that.
take a look at it, if you don't know where it is, I'm happy to show you, but if multiple people wanna go, I'd rather go in a group, so I don't have to make multiple trips. Or when I go to check the camera, if you want me to let you know, and you can come. You should see it. So,
Where is it? It's in Island Pond?
it's an Island Pond Conservation Area, yeah.
Like, it's probably like some sort of kids or younger people creating a.
So there's two opinions, and we'll see which one comes out. But yeah, the newer thing is that this might be some young kids,
Oh.
but it might be a very good opportunity to educate
Yeah.
people about what you should and shouldn't do on land that's not
Oh.
yours.
Yeah.
How soon are you planning to,
Potentially Friday, if not Monday, if not, probably,
When they chopped down the
Right,
trees,
Friday.
did they remove the wood?
well, maybe if Jim goes, he can reach out to you and you guys can go. Like, I don't know if you were gonna go check it out, but
like, when Friday in the morning?
I don't know.
Or
I'd have to.
If it were
probably-
afternoon, it's not a problem.
Probably afternoon.
Oh, I'd be around.
Can you take a picture and send it?
I have pictures, but for some reason, my Google phone, when I try to email photos to myself, all of a sudden, it's making me use a Google app and all these other things, and I can't send it to myself. and I don't want to connect my phone to my work computer, you know. So anyway, there's that. We need to decide if we're gonna have a executive session for 30 Harbor Road. We don't have we're not in executive session now, but essentially, what I can tell you is it was superseded,
Well,
and
you should see, have gotten your email, right?
I did.
What are you pointing at?
No, everybody would have gotten your email so they know what the issue is,
Yes,
so you don't have to.
but right. Do you want, would we have a quorum, and do you want to meet on Monday evening, and do you have time?
I won't be here.
I can be.
We need a quorum, so,
I'll be here.
I can be there.
Carolyn.
So,
Brad said he could be.
It could be. I would say, if everyone else is, I'd say it may or may not be, if
All right.
that's all right.
to discuss
Right.
only this.
Only an executive session on whether or not we are going to challenge the decision made by the state.
Right.
If we don't, this is our only chance to do it,
So there'd be 5 of us,
All
from
right,
what it sounds
so
like.
let's plan, we'll be in the small, I gotta make sure I got a hearing room, because the selectmen are gonna be in here. So if we can get the small hearing room or something else, I'll check in the morning, but I'm gonna schedule it, because we have to do it 48 hours in advance, so. That's
So
enough.
you
If someone else has to drop out and you need a quorum,
I
I
will
could
let you know.
probably make it, but I'd kind of.
So are you gonna send an email confirming that we're meeting? or-
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so plan on meeting Monday. If we could meet a little earlier, could people do that?
That's fine with me, anytime.
It was gonna come down to Brad and getting back from work and stuff, so let me see what he can do, okay?
Okay.
And it really should be it should be short, okay? But we just can't do it tonight. That's what I
Okay.
got.
Anything else? I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.